Woe be unto him who opens one of the 7 gateways to hell, because through that gateway, evil will invade the world.
Valentine's Day is a curse that'll live on, and no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago. In this little town, when the 14th comes round, there's a silence and fear in the air. Remember the morn that the legend was born, all the shock and the horror was there. Oh, the legend, they say, on a Valentine's Day is a curse that'll live on, and no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago. And no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago.
Tell the sheriff I shot him.
Who?
Tell him he's still on the loose.
Is this some kind of joke? I've been trick-or-treated to death tonight.
You don't know what death is.
All right, I'm here with Bruce Holecheck and Nathaniel Thompson, two people that have done tons of commentaries and work on a whole bunch of DVDs and Blu-rays. It's an honor to have them on here. And we're here to talk about kind of a legendary 1981 movie from a legendary franchise, Halloween 2. That's right. So how's it going, guys?
Good. Thanks for having us. Definitely a pleasure to be on here, which is funny because I don't like being on camera. I don't like talking, and I'm not even that sure that I like the two of you. So, yeah. But still, happy to be here.
Likewise, especially talking about this movie, because there's a lot to go into with this one. It's a complicated movie that I love very, very deeply ever since I was a kid.
Yeah, and I think, me and Nathaniel are a little bit older than you are, Nathaniel being, you're 73 now? Something like that. So we both kind of grew up with this movie, probably a little bit more than you. As a kid growing up in the 80s, at least for me, it was all about franchise horror. I couldn't wait for the next slasher sequels to come out. Those were kind of the things that were being mainly touted in Fangoria and stuff, which I started buying at age 9. It's this one was right up there. It was an early view for me, and I've always enjoyed it quite a bit. I guess unless did you want to throw in something with that, Nathaniel?
I was obviously way too young to see this in the theater when it came out, and one reason this is special is because Halloween was very legendary when I was a kid. I think I would have been 8 when this came out in theaters, and the original Halloween just had this huge mystique, at school on the playground. Every kid could play the Halloween theme on the piano, even if they'd seen the movie or not. It was the easiest thing to play. But the original one I knew by heart before I even saw the movie, because kids who had somehow snuck in or gotten taken to see the original would describe it in details. By the time I saw it, it was on network TV, which happened because of Halloween 2. It didn't air until that time when obviously, Carpenter went and shot the new scenes, and covered up Jamie Lee Curtis's hair with the towel. We all know the drill. And and this thing got covered in Famous Monsters. That's how I really, because they were leading up to it. They were banging the drum for Halloween 2 long before it came out. So, I was, every time we went to the grocery store, I'd grab the new Famous Monsters, be like, Mom, I want this. And we'd always I'd start to see all the new pictures from Halloween 2. And I was like, oh, this looks amazing,
Right.
So the movie itself was almost incidental by the time it came out, because to kids of my age, elementary school, it's this was the shit, more than Friday the 13th, because we knew we would never stand a chance of ever seeing that, until we were much older, because it was so gory. But, Halloween 2 is something I really want to see that.
Right.
There was something almost classy about the Halloween movies, where my parents would definitely let me rent the Halloween movies just because they were there in the video store. They were always there. I rented them young too. And I would always rent, I think the first 5 is probably that were out when I was renting a lot of stuff in the video stores. So I'd always do the marathons, and I always had an affinity for them growing up. And I kind of drifted away from the Halloween movies because maybe it's oversaturation in general, or just being talked to death about the Halloween movies so much that you just drift away. And I was always more of a monster zombie guy. I enjoyed my slashers, but I was more the extreme or zombie or whatever I get my hands on. But I remember having an affinity for them a lot growing up, and I just drifted away. And then I'm kind of coming back and showing some more appreciation for them again. Sorry about cutting you off there, Bruce. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, I guess, to properly talk about Halloween 2, you kind of need to put it in a little bit of context. So the first Halloween film was kind of notorious for being the most successful independent movie of all time, or at least at that point. It had a budget of $300,000, and it brought in, just theatrically, about $70 million, which is nothing to sneeze at, and of course, if you have that sort of return on investment, eventually the money men are going to want a sequel. So with that, it's funny because, a lot of people will say that John Carpenter was never really slated to direct Halloween 2, which may be true, but the original package that that was put together by Erwin, is it Yablans, right? Yablans, however that's pronounced. The original idea that he talked about with John Carpenter was basically, I'll do one for you if you do this one for me. So it was originally supposed to be a package deal with The Fog, where he would go ahead and get The Fog produced as long as Carpenter would come back for Halloween 2. And it's debatable whether or not he was originally supposed to be attached as a director with it. Eventually, he just became a co-writer and co-producer of it. what happened with that original deal is that it wasn't a signed contract. It was more of a free talk sort of, handshake deal, which Yablans then, on a plane flight to the Cannes Film Festival, he found himself sitting next to one of the head guys from Avco Embassy. And he was telling, we're going to be working with Carpenter again on, these 2 movies. And then, apparently as soon as he landed, the guy from Avco Embassy called up John Carpenter and apparently made another deal with him to do The Fog through Avco Embassy instead of working with Yablans on it, which then caused him to turn around and sue John Carpenter for a sort of breach of contract. And eventually they came to an agreement where Avco Embassy would do The Fog, but he would give Halloween 2 back to Yablans and be on there as a producer and writer for it.
Yeah, that sounds right. They explained that in the making of documentary a bit on the Halloween 2 making of, which is 45 minutes or so. It has a bunch of the people involved with the Halloween group and everything. And Carpenter had that kind of. He had Escape from New York was also an AFCO, and that was 81. Mm-hmm. So 80 and 81, it kind of made sense. Yeah. So, as far as go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. So eventually, he did sit down to write it, and really didn't have much in the way of ideas for it. And really the whole process was kind of cynical. He didn't want to do it. He felt as though he was kind of just be repeating himself. He thought that he had already made, the best killer versus babysitter movie that he possibly could. Interestingly, so some of the early reports that Yablans was giving genre magazines at the time, before the movie went into, when the movie was still in pre-production, he had mentioned that the original script idea involved Jamie Lee Curtis living in a high-rise apartment building, which was almost sort of like a big screen, remake sort of certain elements from, was that Strangers Watching? Is that the one?
Someone's Watching Me.
Someone's Watching Me, yeah. So it's kind of funny that it sort of morphed from that back into just a direct continuation of the original movie. I imagine it would be a much different film in a high-rise apartment. I can't imagine why they would have ever wanted to go that route with it in the first place, but whatever.
Yeah, and also worth noting that by the time Halloween 2 came around, it was no longer an indie franchise. This was Universal, and they were really coming out with guns blazing. If you look at the posters, it's all new, more of the night he came home. I mean, they had a lot of muscle behind this thing. The problem was that they had the problem is when you have a release date for a movie locked in, that causes kind of a domino effect that rolls back, because this came out the day before Halloween in 81, and they had to meet that. And so there were a lot of issues that cropped up with this movie. There were a lot of sort of heads butting, and also because there were 2 movies that had come out that had a big influence on this one. First of all, of course, obviously you had Friday the 13th in 1980, and they realized they were up against Friday the 13th Part 2, which came out that year, and the people suddenly wanted, slash right from the beginning. I mean, Friday the 13th Part 2 is you got, Alice getting a nice pick in the head before the credits even roll. And you've also got The Empire Strikes Back in 1980, which, had that famous twist. I assume everybody has seen this, but I won't give it away out of politeness, but we all know what it is.
Right.
But so that plot twist essentially started filtering into the idea of a franchise wasn't something that really existed yet. But when you had a film series, and all of a sudden everything had to be connected, you had to have a twist in the subsequent movie, which is where Carpenter suddenly was like, oh, well, our twist is going to be that, Laurie's Michael's sister, which causes some major logic issues if you think about it for even 2 seconds. But so of course, they obviously went back and they shot that scene in Halloween 2 where Laurie's having a flashback of a little kid being taken to see Michael in the sanitarium. It's the right thing in the movie where I'm like, why is this here? This makes absolutely zero sense on any level.
It seems like something out of Prom Night. Almost, right? On the soft focus, yeah.
Right, exactly. Soft focus, blooming whites, and you're like, what is this? It just feels so shoehorned in.
Right, it's we're locking up the secret file, and yet we're going to drag Laurie out in public with her parents to go see Michael in the asylum. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Sure.
Right, right.
Hey, honey, here's your crazy killer brother, by the way. Say hi.
And also,
Yeah.
you had no memory of any of that up until just this moment, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, what was that whole big thing where they had the doctors to convincing kids all these weird repressed memories that they were in a satanic cult and they were molested? Like, is this one of those things?
Right.
But it also it causes that reshoot, that really awkward reshoot that's really well shot and awesome. Like I think some of the reshoots that Carpenter shot are actually better directed, but script wise they're just like, what? Like it's almost like, I know Night Train Murders has that too, where they're basically explaining all this stuff on the radio. They don't do that. They don't tell you that the survivors of a case are at this hospital and the guy with the boombox. It's almost like, I'm just like, I love how this is shot, but because my favorite parts of these movies are Michael Myers wandering the streets of Haddonfield, and but they're not gonna. That scene's so awkward. It's such exposition dump, right? It's such a like, well, not exposition, but it's to move the story. It's the catalyst to get him to the hospital, but it's still like it's head scratching because it's just not. It's weird. But complaining about realism in a slasher movie is like, that's a bit much. Just calm down. You're gonna be okay. You know.
Well, I mean, yeah, compared to Friday the 13th, it's an exercise in like cold logic because nobody's ever been able to figure out the leap from the first to the second film. You're like, what? This is gibberish, but we love it anyway.
Well, and that brings me to I guess one of the next point. I really think that like at the time it was released, it did reasonable box office. They had a much bigger budget on Halloween 2 than the first one, about 2.5 million. And it only pulled in about a third of the, a little over a third of the box office revenue that the first one did. It says that they brought in about 25 million or so, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's still, 10 times your investment. But I do feel like one of the main detractions, one of the things that detractors really bring up about the film is almost seems like the movie is more vilified for what it isn't than what it is. I think a lot of people really kind of shit on this movie because it's not Halloween, because it did try to update itself for the times, and it is a little trashier, it is a little more violent, it is a little stupider. But that's kind of why I like it. It kind of spits in the face of what's expected from a Halloween sequel, which is weird because it does pick up directly after the first film. It's literally from the last frames of the last film is where this one jumps off, and it all takes place in a single night. It's still just a continuation of that night, and that was actually one of the things that director Rick Rosenthal liked about it. Was it was literally a direct continuation of those events and what would happen to those characters afterwards. And as such, I think that it doesn't really have a lot of fat on it. It doesn't necessarily take place in real time, but because it is such a limited time frame, the movie really books, especially after, apparently after the first cut, Carpenter went in and was like, no, it needs to be scarier, it needs to be faster. So they actually trimmed out a few of the things that kind of added a little bit more characterization or added a little more, a few plot details here, some of which eventually turned into the TV version, which we can, I guess we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, I really feel as though the movie was kind of got a short shrift just because it wasn't Halloween. And it's funny, a lot of people talk about the influence of the first Halloween on the slasher film, but I think it's Halloween 2 that really shows that Friday the 13th was a much bigger influence on the slasher films of the 80s than the original Halloween. You don't really find too many slasher movies that try to emulate the feel of Halloween. And it seems like they're more interested in, the inventive kills than the first Halloween was, with its kind of like roving camera work and, emphasis on suspense.
The Escape Maniac, though, is definitely a Halloween take, but it's also a Black Christmas take, right?
Right. Yeah. So I got a question for you guys. So speaking of the roving camera work, Dean Cundey's camera work in the first Halloween was really seen as, one of its greatest assets. Carpenter has jokingly referred to the first Halloween as his Argento flick. Now, do you guys feel as though it could have been he could have been influenced by Argento at that, or do you think he was more influenced by stuff like Black Christmas, or do you think he had any influence at all? With him joking that being his Argento flick, I mean, I could totally see him and his USC buddies smoking a bunch of weed and going to the drive-in and checking out Deep Red or something like that. Do you think that is like a possibility? What do you think his influences on the first Halloween were?
Deep Red is all over both of these movies. I don't see how you can avoid it. I mean, in the first Halloween has a direct quote from it where Laurie's sitting with the knitting needle by the sofa. I mean, that's literally just an exact replica of the shot in Deep Red when she kills the bird, among other things. But Halloween 2 is loaded with it. I mean, obviously the hot tub murder scene is right out of Deep Red,
right?
As is the shot of the children's drawings on the desk and all that stuff. I mean, it's very Deep Red.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Right in the school, right with the knife in the children's drawing. Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, the score, I think. I definitely think that Carpenter lifted a lot of the score from Suspiria for sure. I think, like, if you see the trajectory of those wild scores, I mean, you have Exorcist, which is a very memorable score, but that's a song that's not even it's lifted from the Tubular Bells song. And then you have Suspiria, and then you have Halloween, and then you have Phantasm, and all those scores kind of feel similar, and then even like Zombie. So I feel like Suspiria was one of those ones, Goblin, of course, and Deep Red. So I do see the similarities there. As far as the cinematography, I think that Argento always had more of a budget to do these wild things, especially if you see like in Tenebrae. So I do see like beautiful widescreen like filming and all that stuff, but I don't know how much of that is directly taken from just the camera work exactly. But I mean, shots probably most likely I didn't notice as much as you guys did, but the score is what would come to me as definitely being inspired by Italian stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, speaking of the photography, you usually don't get these types of movies shot in scope either. It's very unusual to have a slasher movie shot in scope. Usually they're kind of like shot around 185, shot flat and then matted. Whereas these had this, beautiful anamorphic scope. And the camera work from Dean Cundy. Dean Cundy, who he was brought back into this film, he turned down Poltergeist to do this just out of out of dedication to John Carpenter. But I do think his photography really kind of gives the film a different grace than a lot of these more rough and tumble indie slashers did of the time. I mean, 81 was overloaded with slashers, to say the least. So I really do think that the photography is one of the things that sets this apart. And Rick Rosenthal said that that was one of the things he was trying to emulate was the feel of the original Halloween. This was Rosenthal's first film. He wasn't the first choice either. Originally, the film was offered to Tommy Lee Wallace, who turned it down because he didn't really like the direction it was going, and the fact that it just seemed like kind of a copy of the first Halloween. He didn't think it was really doing anything new. So he turned it down, based on the violence and nudity and some of the, the fact that it was a little meaner. So it went over to Rick Rosenthal, who apparently, like Carpenter, had seen some of his shorts that he did, like film school shorts. And they picked him for this as his first feature. And him and Deborah Hill were still kind of a little bit hands-on. But what Rosenthal said was that, at that time, he hadn't even actually seen the original Halloween. He knew about it. But so he went out and watched it multiple times and really studied, what he liked about the movie, what he thought he could bring to it. And one of the things was the photography. So that's why even right off the bat, you get like a lot of those long tracking shots, which were, I guess this was pre-Steadicam. I guess it was Panaglide.
No, this was after, because The Shining was the first one that Bound for Glory did the first Steadicam shot, and then The Shining really went nuts with it.
Gotcha.
But
I think these ones were still Panaglide though.
Panaglide, yeah.
So that the photography, the fact that he did try to bring that feel from the first one to it, is definitely an attribute to the film.
And also more, I think this one, I don't see any Suspiria really in the original Halloween, but I see it a lot of it in Halloween 2, because something that they introduce here is the idea of those little gray stones with the primary color, like gel lighting that pops onto things. You first really see it in the that first time you see Charles Cyphers in the movie when he's with Donald Pleasence, where they're driving in the car, and you have that super bright saturated lime green lighting, just like bathing which is very Argento. It's very Suspiria, and also like the entire thing with Laurie in the basement of the hospital, where it's that bright, vivid red. But you have that through the whole movie. These little colors that kind of just pop and it creates a little bit more of a dimension to the movie, which is kind of a neat little transition. But yeah, that seems like another Argento touch in there. But that's one of my favorite things about the photography, along with just those great tracking shots through the empty hospital halls. I think they're just really beautiful.
Right. How funny would it have been if they brought back the Suspiria cab driver somewhere in the movie?
Oh, should have. Yeah, he should have been the ambulance driver.
Yeah, exactly right.
Happy Memorial.
The one part I thought was really done with the lighting that was really well done was the scene where Myers obviously comes out from the dark. And I was like, that's his best directed scene in the movie. I was just like, I do not remember that scene being so actually scary. It's really well done.
Scene. Yeah, that was a reshoot.
Yeah,
was it?
Yeah.
I think Carpenter shot all the best. I don't want to be rude, but I really do think he did, because all the reshoots are great of the murder sequence, which was basically the scene with the neighbors and the sandwich and everything, which was basically redone in Halloween 2018, which is funny because I don't want to even talk about those because there's so many Halloween movies, but they choose to ignore part 2, but then just reshoot the best scene from part 2 for their movie. And so I don't hate the movie, but it's very funny that they chose that scene and redid the scene. But I always felt that scene with that is probably my favorite, the POV stuff in the street. That's my only knock on Halloween 2 is it leaves off the high of the first Halloween, right? And you're thrown into the high climax of part 1, how that had that twist ending, and Myers is gone, and then you're high there with Donald Pleasence going through. You don't know what death is, all that stuff. For the first 30 minutes, you feel like you're in that excitement, and then we get to the hospital, and I think that it starts to slow down. So I think that the first act of Halloween 2 is probably my favorite and the strongest, which I still do like the second and third act, but I think that it starts on a high and kind of levels out a little bit.
Yeah, it's the hospital stuff does have like a bit of a creepier kind of like different vibe to it, which I do really like. But before I jump onto that, yes, back to your point, the scene where the girl's getting the hypodermic in her head, and Michael Myers' face just kind of slowly comes in out of the darkness, which is a little bit of a kind of a restaging of a trick that they did in the first one as well. But yeah, I think that is one of the best shots of Halloween 2. Yeah, when I just rewatched the movie last night to prep for this, for the first time in probably a dozen years or so. I guess actually since probably the Scream Factory Blu-ray, the original Scream Factory Blu-ray came out, which was 2011. So that will put us at 12, 13 years. Yeah, that shot really surprised me. And yeah, just the fact that was one of John Carpenter's reshoots is really funny, because it's such a good shot. And it's basically him just being like, well, I know it works. I'm sure he saw the reaction it got from an audience multiple times with the first movie. So he's like, well, hell, let's do it again. And it's still just as effective. It's still a really, really creepy, good shot.
And it's one of the shots that got demolished if you saw it on VHS when it got pan and scanned. It was so dark, it was so murky. It came in too late. I remember watching it on tape, and yeah, it was like the whole gimmick of that shot was kind of ruined, along with a bunch of other moments. You got to watch this thing scope or not at all, basically.
Right. So talking about the hospital section of the film, I think that's another attribute of the movie. Yes, it does feel a little bit of a different tone, but I think we can all agree that hospitals are just fucking creepy, like no matter what. And I do think that that's something that's actually a bit underutilized in movies. I work at a hospital for my day job, and even during the day when the whole place is packed, there's still areas you can go into and it's just barren. You don't see another person like through entire hallways, and everything's just dead quiet. And especially like once it gets into the evenings or nighttime, like this movie, because this movie's supposed to be taking place in the early AM hours. Yeah, these places are barren and creepy. And besides this movie, I mean, you have stuff like, I think Visiting Hours has some moments in it that are really good.
That's the next year, 82.
Yeah. I love Visiting Hours. I think that's really an underrated, really solid, twisted little slasher movie. Well, I was getting ready to say one that doesn't work so
X-ray.
much.
Yeah.
One that doesn't work so much is Hospital Massacre. Which
I
is
love
like,
that.
Oh my god,
it's a crappy movie, but it's the best crappy movie.
Dumb as shit. It is so. Ugh.
And I love how they get away with not having anyone in the hospital. Those floors are all being remodeled.
Right.
So, AKA, we can splatter as much blood on these floors as we would like. That's one of those. That's a canon. That's a canon.
Yeah.
And the year before they had Schizoid, which is also kind of a medical-oriented slasher, which I think is worse than Hospital Massacre. More boring.
I might lean a little more Schizoid just because it's a little more giallo flavored. I feel like it's a little more stylish.
Better cast.
Yeah. Hospital Massacre, my biggest issue is that, like, why doesn't she just fucking leave? It's like the whole time, like, she could just leave the hospital. She's not being, like, held there, you know?
They keep sending her to different places to get this x-ray. They're like, well, you got to go to this floor and this floor. And that's 81, right? I keep forgetting to mention that one.
It's somewhere around there, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. I think I watched it for 81 already. I can't, either that or 80. I can't remember which. Right. My brain.
Another. Go ahead. What?
He said it's a Buñuel homage that she can't leave the hospital. She's
right. Yeah. The one part that always makes me laugh about X-Ray, though, or Hospital Massacre, whatever you want to call it, is the scene where they actually show the X-ray of her. And you're looking at it, you're like, what the hell is going on with her intestines? It's like the X-ray is just like, looks like the worst possible X-ray you would ever want to see. You're like, oh. But yeah, it makes no sense. Another movie that I thought really does the whole creepy hospital vibe really well. It was one of those like 8 films to die for. It might have been like the first or second year that they were doing those. Unrest, exactly. I thought that was actually really well done. I thought that was really a surprising little movie.
Oh, if we're talking hospital horror. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nathaniel.
I was going to say 2 others. You can feel the influence of Halloween 2 big time in a movie I like more than Bruce does, but Cold Prey 2. That is a huge Halloween 2 riff. And then obviously they riff on Halloween 2 as well in both Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 and David Gordon Green's Halloween Kills. I mean, those both have hospitals in them, much more so in Halloween Kills. But I mean, it's this movie just has like a much longer reach, I think, than people kind of tend to give it credit for.
Well, and it's I'll go ahead, Dave, and then
I was going to say my one that I think is probably the ultimate hospital horror is got to be The Kingdom by Lars von Trier. But it's a ghost story. But I mean, that's probably one of the strongest hospitals. That's more of also a dark comedy in a lot of ways too.
I do feel like there's a couple J horrors that are very hospital, and it's funny because that kind of sense of unease does kind of fit very well into the J horror mold. I know there's one, but I can't for the life of me think of the title because I haven't watched it in like 15, 18 years or something.
Is Reincarnation in a hospital? There's one of them that really
that's
is.
The one.
I can't remember what it is. I really can't.
So it is funny, Nathaniel, that you do mention the feel, how this does share some similarities with the other Halloween 2s, because I definitely we are 100% tracking on that. All of the Halloween 2s kind of take a look at what happens to the characters of a slasher movie after the slasher movie, including just the influence it has on the community as a whole. Which they especially do way more in the more recent one. But this Halloween 2 does even have that, where they're like throwing stones at the Myers house, breaking through the windows and stuff, just because, he came back, all these years later. So the community's kind of in a bit of unrest, which we also do see a little less so in the Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, which is a movie that I actually do like quite a bit. That's another one that really gets shit on.
I'm a fan as well.
Yeah, I kind of have a weird affinity for it because, it kind of takes a look at what happens to the characters of a slasher movie after the slasher movie. You got the teen survivor, the final girl. She's all messed up and acting out and all gothy and angsty. The doctor's exploiting it to make money with books and stuff. And Michael Myers himself just grew a big old COVID beard and is living in the woods eating dead animals and shit. So I kind of, it doesn't necessarily execute everything perfectly, but I kind of like that idea about it. And I kind of, I like that about the newest Halloween 2 as well. How kind of, everybody makes fun of Evil Dies Tonight. But I do like the idea of looking at the effect that this sort of mass murder event would have on a small community like that. Because, it's not to get morbid, but, we just had a murder not that far from me last year around here, and that's something that doesn't happen around here. And even just that one singular thing, I mean, the community went nuts. I mean, people were, going crazy trying to figure out what was happening and what, there's a full-on message board started about it, and like big old, meetings and rallies and all this sort of stuff. So I couldn't even imagine if something like these movies happened where it was, double digits, which is actually one of the funnier things. So it almost like a bit of a funny sort of meta touch, like towards the end of Halloween 2, the cops are talking like as they're wheeling people away in the ambulance, and the one cop's like, well, how many was it this time? And the other one's like 10, and just
10 so far.
Yeah, 10 so far, right? Yeah, I thought that was really funny. They're kind of keeping the tally.
Just to touch on what you were saying, one thing I like about Halloween 2 that I've never seen anybody actually remark on is I think this is the first slasher film that I can think of that was ever made that actually dealt with grief, where they actually show the aftermath of it, because you have that really kind of strangely beautiful moment where Charles Cyphers, where they pull the blanket back and he sees his daughter there.
His daughter, right.
And I mean, the way he reacts, like, you don't see the real impact. Like, you would never see that in a Jason movie. You don't see people grieving and suffering the consequences, whereas this one does touch on that. And on top of it, you also have that kind of cruel twist of the knife where the guy that you find out who gets, incinerated alive is Ben Tramer, the guy that Gloria has the crush on.
Right.
Such a sadistic plot twist.
It is.
Luckily, she has, Jimmy the orderly to fall back on. Depending on which version you see, she ends up with him or she doesn't.
Right, he's dead or not. We're not sure. Right.
Right. Yeah, there's two very different outcomes to that story. But I like the fact that it's a little bit deeper, and especially if you watch some of the scenes that were cut, there is a lot of character camaraderie. You do become more attached to these characters, I think, especially in the TV cut.
Right.
But there is kind of this underlying humanity to it, and you do sort of feel Laurie is like so confused by what's happening. She's sort of trying to reconnect with the world around and sort of get her bearings through the whole movie, which is, it ties in with that idea that this place is suddenly like just, a switch got flipped and the whole town is just traumatized, right? Which is something to kind of leave through the whole movie. And when you have that, the only scene in daylight is like just the last 2 minutes, when she gets wheeled out of the ambulance. That's kind of like the hangover after this horrible nightmare has gone on. So I kind of like that feel of the movie, that you're sort of stuck in this, this constant sense of confusion because nobody knows where Michael is through the course of the whole movie.
Right.
And adding on to all that stuff you guys are both saying, that reminds me of the end of the night coming Hell Night. Of course, the ends with them leaving in the bright day, 81, another slasher. So many similarities between all the slashers. But there's definitely
wasn't that produced by Yablans as well? Or am I misremembering things?
I think Fade to Black was. I don't remember if Hell Night was. I think Fade to Black was produced by him, right?
All right, somebody
I can't remember.
Somebody
look it up. There. But there's most definitely a reason why small communities, they tear down the houses of John Wayne Gacy and the apartment complex where Jeffrey Dahmer committed his murders, because these places are just, they don't want them sitting around. And right. the idea that they're there and other people are coming to visit them. But I do like that mob mentality starting very early on in Halloween 2, because it carries on to the sequels, of course, that mob mentality big time. And it's been used in so many other horror films. Even the Truth or Dare films by Tim Ritter would carry on that kind of idea of exploiting and making the money from it, which is what the Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 does with Loomis. But I think that the new sequels, although Halloween Kills is a weird kind of tonal thing, it's kind of cheesy and silly at times. The idea that I think Halloween Kills tried to do was create the mythos of Michael Myers through one film instead of a series of films. And that's why they had all that big push. And I think that the third one, although people hate Halloween Ends, I think that it's actually my favorite of the three. Huh. I'm not trying to be a contrarian. My idea is that it's kind of making the idea that the town is cursed. It's the evil and the hatred of the town that is keeping Michael Myers alive. And it's not just keeping Myers alive, it's keeping evil alive, where it goes back to Loomis. He had the black eyes. There's nothing underneath him. He is evil. He's not the kid Michael Myers. He's evil. And that's that town, that evil, that hatred carried on through the Haddonfield into the next vessel, the shape, if you will. So I felt the movie was a little bit better constructed than people did, but horror fans, as they did with Halloween 3, it's not Michael Myers.
Right.
They make the same mistakes over, as we always all do. I mean, I also have no ownership of the Halloween series. Everyone has the couple franchises that they're really close to, and if they do something, maybe you can be like, eh. But I with Halloween, I'm just like, I just want to see something fun or different or good. And and maybe it's not the best movie ever, but I found some interesting takeaways from those three movies, and after they came as a trilogy. So
Yeah, it's funny. I actually watched the last Halloween movie at Nathaniel's house in Los Angeles last year. I was out there for a as a surprise, which was which was very much a surprise. It was for his birthday surprise, months after his birthday, which really makes it a surprise. But so yeah, that popped up on streaming right when I was out there. So yeah, we watched it with a couple other friends of his out there, and yeah, we had some conversations about it afterwards about whether or not it was successful as a Halloween movie. You know, I know that we both liked that it tried something different, which really was probably the best thing I can say about it. You know, it was interesting in that it did kind of try to flip things around a bit. So I can definitely understand, like you said, that was a good call, with similar to the reaction that people had to Halloween 3 back when Halloween 3 came out. People were just in an uproar about that movie, which I never quite understood. And thankfully that one has seemed to reclaim some sort of good reputation in the last 2 decades or so. Do
you remember the days back in early IMDb when Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, when its rating was like a 3.1? It was like about 100 at one point. Like, I was like, what's wrong with you people? Like,
right. Or Friday 5. It's not Jason. It's like either was the first one. You watch these movies for nudity and kills, and Friday 5 is riddled with nudity and kills. I don't know what you guys want.
Yeah, honestly, Friday 5 is probably one of my favorites of the series, just because it's so twisted and so sleazy.
First 5 I love.
Yeah, Danny Steinman really kind of brought it. You can feel his influence on Friday 5.
Yeah, sleaze.
But yeah, did you want to talk about the newest Halloween, Nathaniel?
I was going to say, it's interesting that Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, in a way, kind of ran into the same issue as the first Halloween 2, in that they had a certain game plan mapped out from the director that kind of got thrown up in the air. Obviously, David Gordon Green had the 3 films mapped out. They were all supposed to take place on the same night, like Halloween 2 does. And then COVID hit and just screwed everything up completely. So that's why you have this weird disconnect between the movies, especially Halloween Ends, because that was supposed to be occurring, like the whole Corey thing was supposed to be going on simultaneously the same night, and that was all supposed to just keep running. But again, COVID messed up and they had to rethink the entire ending. That's why the ending of Halloween Kills is so weird, and it doesn't really segue into the third film at all. It's like suddenly Laurie turns into a totally different person in part 3 because they had to be like, oh crap. Everything got delayed. And but in Halloween 2 as well, it's like they wanted to feel like it was carrying on from the first film, but then you have these tonal shifts, and it also got restructured a lot. So you said that you have issues with the hospital sequence, and one reason why that might be, and why I certainly did the first time I watched it, you can feel something is off in this movie with pacing wise, and that's because they wanted to push Michael back to the front of the movie. The idea was that you weren't even supposed to really see Michael for the first 20 minutes, that he's disappeared and nobody knows where he is, and so you're supposed to have this build up. And they're like, no. So they took the Elrod sequence, pushed it to the beginning of the movie. They added on the scene with Alice getting stabbed, because they want Michael sort of peppered through the whole movie. But that really causes a lot of problems because there's no escalation whatsoever. And that's why the first act is so fun, but then there's really nowhere you can go because you've already had Michael running around chopping people up.
And that would add a little more suspense to the film as well, I believe, especially once you have with the car accident scene, with the kid getting hit by the cop car and smashing into the ambulance or whatever and exploding, because you wouldn't necessarily know whether that was Michael Myers or not, and it would kind of keep a little bit more of a mystery to it, which is a great fire gag too. One thing that this movie really does benefit from its increased budget is these pyrotechnics. Between that scene and the explosion at the end of the movie, they're both really and the firewalk. Those are really both really solid fire gags. But anyway, back to you.
That fire suit gag at the end with him like just sort of shuffling through the fire. I love that so much.
Right. It's funny, and it's funny because it feels almost like a little bit of a homage to one of Carpenter's favorite films, which is the original The Thing from Another World. Yeah. That scene where they throw the kerosene on the guy. I mean, it's right there. He's walking through, bursting. It's
a long fire flame for 50 what?
Yeah,
50, 51. Isn't it 51?
Yeah. That was jaw dropping when I saw that. I'm like, holy shit! I'm like, that is like a serious burn gag.
They killed that vegetable man.
hope you like your Brussels sprouts. Well done.
Roasted. That is kind of funny. I also have to mention that another big slasher movie that actually seemed to have some money behind it also wanted to do an immense burn sequence right in the beginning. The two of them, the burning, of course. And I feel like the burning, I feel like, I don't know why, but that one seems a little bit more expensive than a lot of the other slashers at the time. Probably, this and the Halloween 2 are probably the most expensive slashers of 81, right? I don't know how much My Bloody Valentine cost, or Happy Birthday to Me was a little classy. That probably cost a bit of money because the director and the
a few more names and stuff in it.
Yeah,
I think what really benefits The Burning is its photography. Just its location photography really kind of adds. It gives the whole movie a really appealing look. I'm not huge on The Burning. I think it's kind of a mid-tier. I know. I'm sorry. I realize I'm very very alone on this island.
Not anymore.
My biggest problem with it is that most of the main characters aren't that likable. I find most of the secondary characters much more likable. Like you got that one guy. Who was the one guy that like he's trying to get the girl, go skinny dipping with her, and he starts putting the moves on her. Yeah. He's like such a prick.
He's a piece of shit.
What the fuck you come out here for?
Like, that's Ned Eisenberg from Last Man Standing with Bruce Willis. He's a million movies. Yeah.
I really like it's more fun if you watch it as a prequel to Fast Times at Ridgemont High if Brian Backer is playing the same character.
In that movie, that character does not date well. In 81, people are like, I feel bad for him. Rewatching it now, you're like, I'm Team Glazer. Get that pervert out of here, guys. Like, you'll pick on people, but you can pick on the guy who's peeping on people. That's the guy you pick on.
Yeah, he's a full-on sex criminal in the making. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly.
But what The Burning does have, I mean, it has great photography. It has an amazing Rick Wakeman score. That score is so good. And it's Tom Savini kill scenes. That raft scene is like one of the greatest moments of all of 80 slasher movies. But yeah, the rest of it, like, it doesn't quite, I don't know why I don't quite love it nearly as much as a lot of other people seem to.
Well, that's okay. You can be the minority.
I am.
I want to touch on something that Dave brought up at the beginning, which is that you said you preferred monster movies over slasher movies. But what's interesting about Halloween 2 and Friday the 13th Part 2 did this at the exact same time, is they turned their slashers into monster movies. They became supernatural. So Friday the 13th Part 2, it's like Jason, it's not explained, but he's obviously suddenly he is a monster. I mean, he's not really a slasher anymore. This isn't like Maniac or He Knows You're Alone or Don't Go in the House. This is something very different. He's a full-on movie monster.
Right.
And Michael is the same thing. Michael is full-on supernatural in this. You get the whole druid background that Pleasence spills out in the back seat, that he's been imbued with some sort of power, that he is unkillable. He gets shot in the head multiple times. He's weeping blood, all this stuff. And that's something, it's interesting that most of the slashers that have endured are the ones who are basically movie monsters. They introduced that with Chucky, with Freddy. Halloween 2 is kind of really the one that set the pace for that, where it's like it's not just some random guy, crazy guy in a mask around killing people. There has to be this extra supernatural element. It's also something that was new at the time.
I shot him 6 times.
6 times, 7 if you watch the opening of this one. But the thing is, that's funny to me is people are still trying to push back that the second Halloween's not supernatural. Like, he walks through a steel frame door. He's set on fire. He's shot in the chest verbatim. He is supernatural in that second movie.
Takes bullets in the eyes. And
godly strong. He picks up who's he pick up like by their like this like
he picks up the nurse with a scalpel too. He stabs her in the back and just lifts her right up.
Monster. Right. And Jason's more arguable in Part 2, but he's none of it makes sense. If he drowned, he's a ghost, right? Like he's like a Victor Crowley technically, and I think he's a ghost, right? Or he never died. Who knows? There's going to be some rough patches when they make these monsters supernatural the first time. There's going to be some what? But by Part 5, you're like, I don't give a shit. Like, you know what I mean? You accept it.
Since you mentioned the scalpel scene, I think Jill is. If you listen to like a lot of horror podcasts, people love playing the game of like, which slasher character would you love to save if you could? And like I said, Jill is one of those. When she gets killed, it's always just blood knife in my heart. I love her. She's so sweet. Couldn't she have gotten out? A lot of the characters in this movie I like, especially if you watch the TV cut, because there is a lot of really nice camaraderie between the characters that you lose out, and a lot of comic relief. Started with Mrs. Alves, because in the TV cut, her reactions, she gets more and more flustered. At Jimmy and Bud at the keep pulling, and she's like, 2 minutes, that's it. She gets so annoyed, and you feel for her in the longer cut because you're just like, God, she has to deal with all these like dipshits who are wandering off and not doing their job. But it's funny. It's like kind of like a workplace comedy, at least if you say the longer cut of the movie. But I really, really like these characters. I like Bud.
Yeah.
I like I like Jill. I like all the nurses. They're just really fun characters, and they're all very differentiated, which is something that doesn't get commented on a lot, I think. But they're really unusually shaded, I think, for a slasher movie at that time. It helps it really stand out.
Yeah, and it's kind of like an unusual scripting choice too. The fact that they did have some of their main characters return, but really don't give them much to do. Like Jamie Lee Curtis is basically comatose for most of the movie. So they kind of just wheel you into. What's that?
And a lot of her stuff got cut out, which is
right.
weird.
And then they redo it in Halloween Ends too. The main complaint about Halloween 2 was that Jamie Lee Curtis is bedridden, so they do it in Halloween Kills as well. And you're like,
but yeah, it's like, so, basically the first movie kind of laid all the groundwork that you needed to. So the second movie is a little more free to just kind of explore these other characters. We're kind of thrown into this alternate scenario. And right, we have to live with a brand new batch of characters that are basically just bullshitting around their job at night, like like most of us do. So yeah, it is kind of fun to live and breathe with some of these characters. And even like somebody like Bud could be seen as sort of like kind of a sleazy character, but the way Leer Rossi plays him is he's just kind of like a playful. He might be a little bit of a jerk, but he's a fun jerk and people like him, and he's just goofing off.
Yeah, I mean, he's not malicious. He's just a goofball. And the way that he's sort of teasing her, with the whole, I guess I just fuck up all the time. Like that whole scene is it's funny,
Right.
With the profanity, just their interplay.
Right.
Fun. It's the kind of thing that actually would happen, like in a wordplay.
Amazing Grace,
of course,
come sit on my face.
He's also high too. He's supposed to enjoy right off the bat. So I mean,
he's sitting there right in the cafeteria, right, just toking away.
You never get it. Well, who knows now? Guys go on lunch and they come back and you're like, it smells like weed in here. I think that's a great idea. Operating heavy machinery. Stay away from me, man.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I'd want Bud driving the ambulance after so much Bud, right?
No, I mean, that's kind of funny that his name is Bud and he's smoking a Bud, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's got to be a visual fucking pun right there, right? Like, no, but he's very memorable, and I think he's the takeaway. I think he's the fan favorite. I think that people watch that, and I mean, Leo Rossi's also had a nice career. I mean, he's in Maniac, Cop 2, and he pops up in. Where's he the dad in? Is he the dad in River's Edge?
He's in River's Edge, yeah.
Yeah, he's one of the dad. He's the drunk dad or something. He's very good in that, and the Relentless movies. So
I was going to say, actually,
like, nice career.
Yeah, the main thing I knew him from, right, is Bill Lustig's Relentless movies. I remember, seeing the trailer for Relentless with him and Judd Nelson. For those that haven't seen Relentless, because I don't even know if that's on DVD.
It's on DVD, no Blu-ray.
Not Blu-ray, yeah.
But at the time, that movie, they marketed the shit out of Relentless. I can remember seeing that TV spot all the time. And yeah, basically Judd Nelson's a serial killer and Leer Rossi's the cop that's after him. And it somehow goes on to, there's 4 of them, I think. I don't know if Leer Rossi's in all of them, but I know he was definitely in part 2. But yeah, I remember, like, I would see those TV spots and I could not wait for that thing to hit cable. And obviously it was successful enough that, they made 4 sequels. Or at least 3 sequels. Yeah.
Very sweaty movie, if I remember. Right. That's all I remember. It's a very sweaty movie. All Lustig's movies seem to be very sweaty, actually.
Yeah, but I've actually really been wanting to rewatch that thing. But yeah, he's had a really good career as far as he kind of became a character actor in just a lot of like B movies. Like he was in a few more high-end things like Relentless, that got major theatrical play, but a lot of his stuff seems like it was a little more direct-to-cable, direct-to-video-ish. But he's always a welcome face. And even like you watch him in the interviews now, like back towards this movie, he's really funny. He's really a goofball.
Seems like a nice guy though, too.
Exactly.
Not like yeah.
So he knew Rick Rosenthal from acting school. And that was kind of the main reason he got this job. Apparently he's gone on to say that Rick really went to bat for him. To get him in this movie. And yeah, I think he's good. I mean, to me, he's probably the MVP of, the new characters. He's very likable. And apparently willing to shed it all for the sake of cinema. It's funny, in the featurette, he does say that the hot tub scene, that hot tub was anything but hot. He said it was like freezing, and he was, fully nude, jumped in there, and he said, I think the quote was, you want to talk about a raisin? and then looks down at his crotch. So yeah, apparently he was willing to do it, but yeah, he was less than impressive.
Anytime there's nudity, it never fails. It's gonna be cold.
Right.
Like anytime you're in a movie, it's like, take your clothes off. Ah, really? Right now?
Yeah, so the rest of the cast didn't really, I mean, there's not really a lot of people who went on to much. I mean, Lance Guest, who plays Jimmy, he was in, obviously the big thing for him was The Last Starfighter, which was another one.
Right, Bruce?
What's that?
The greatest film of the 1980s, right, Bruce?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I just recently, I loved Last Starfighter when I was a kid. My grandma took me to theaters to see it. Just recently rewatched it. I don't know, in the past 6 months or something with a buddy, and we're like, this is garbage. Like, yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah, I was not a fan.
I like it, but I didn't have the affinity for it as a kid. I saw it on TV a couple times, just like half paying attention.
Right.
When the Blu-ray got put out, I was watching it. I really like that's another Halloween 3 connection. What is this? Dan O'Hurley is the alien in it, and he's the bad guy in Halloween 3. He's the best part of the movie. He's very good in that. And the end villains have the best scene. I'm gonna spoil that last. I'm gonna save you some time, and I'm gonna spoil the end of The Last Starfighter. It's the best moment. What do we do now? Die. That's the best part of the whole movie. It's just like die, I guess.
Yeah. We have not had good luck revisiting some of these childhood favorites. We just did Daryl not that long ago too, and that was another one where I was like, "Oh, this." Like, funny enough, the best parts of that one are when you don't even realize he's a robot yet. It's like this kind of weird fish out of water story. Once the government stuff comes into play, it like really kind of lost me. I'm like, this is not nearly as fun as the rest of the movie.
And Cloak and Dagger, right?
Yeah, Cloak and Dagger was a little bit better, but still not as great as I remembered it.
Yeah, we commiserated on 80s revisits a lot. So
right,
I must be a big child at heart because a lot of the movies I still love. Like I still love Ernest Scared Stupid and Little Monsters and Monster Squad, but I guess those movies have a weird quality about them that push it for I don't know.
Yeah, Monster Squad's amazing. The Ernest, I want to do a full-on Ernest rewatch of all of them. There's like what?
Just do Scared Stupid.
No, I want to do all of them.
No, just start with that one because if you watch 4 Ernest movies, by the time you get to part 3, you're going to want to blow your brains out.
Right.
Not that they're bad. It's just that's a lot of Ernest. That's a lot of Ernest for that's a lot.
Know what I mean, Vern?
So I guess do we want to talk about any differences between the theatrical and the TV version? We kind of did a little bit. Before
we do that, I do have in my notes, I want to talk a bit about the soundtrack to it, because there's a couple important pieces about the soundtrack. I know you guys had talked about it a little bit before. So essentially the soundtrack, Carpenter kind of brought in Alan Howarth, not sure how it's pronounced, but he brought him in to kind of basically take what he had already written and sort of rework it into something a little more different for the sequel, which he did. He kind of added some depth to it, and, kind of put a little more flange on it and stuff. Do you want to talk about him a bit, Nathaniel?
Right, so Alan Howard, well, this was almost simultaneously. He worked with John Carpenter on this and Escape from New York, which those were the first 2 films where they worked together. And you could really hear a difference, I think, in those films because Carpenter had gone solo when he did Halloween, Assault on Precinct 13, The Fog. Those have a much more simple kind of thing. And John Carpenter talked about how when he was starting out, like he actually couldn't read music, that these were scores that he did because he knew the equipment that he'd worked on in college, and that these were scores that he, was basically just sort of fooling around with it and created himself. But you can hear that sound design aspect really take off in New York and Halloween 2. It just sounds bigger. It has a lot more texture to it. And what's interesting is it brings back the 3 big themes from Halloween, which are obviously the main Halloween theme, the shape stalking music, that dun, 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 and Laurie's theme. All of those can make an appearance here, but I think Alan Howard introduces some kind of interesting kind of ambient. It's almost like Tangerine Dream in a few spots. Like the scene where Jill comes down and sees the flat tires on the cars. You have this kind of like weird, it's almost like you're not even sure if it's music. It has this weird kind of thing where it escalates. Or like the scene we mentioned with the hypodermic in the eye, the music in there, that's completely new stuff. And I really like that, how it gives a bit of a different vibe. And I think that is a lot of that is the Alan Howard touch, because if you listen to the scores that he did later on, obviously Carpenter washed his hands of Halloween 4 onward until David Gordon Green films. And so Alan Howard did the score for 4, 5, and 6. And that's where I think you can see what he brought to Halloween 2 kind of coming to fruition, especially Halloween 6. The 2 different scores he wrote for that film, I think, are actually really wonderful. They don't really get enough credit. But he does some really fascinating stuff with those, where he kind of remixes what Carpenter did, much more so than he did in Halloween 2, which kind of, it's like, okay, you want more of this, but you're going to get that and a whole lot more. Whereas by the time you get to the later Halloweens, it's completely different.
And I do think one of the interesting things about the Halloween score is that by having those themes be so specific to characters, the Halloween theme actually builds suspense just by existing. Sort of like the theme to Jaws, where you don't even need to see anything happening, but if that theme comes up, you automatically feel the presence of something there, even if you don't see it. So you're automatically kind of getting a little bit on edge just by hearing the theme, without even having to show anything. So would you describe Carpenter as like a minimalist composer? It seems to me like he always just kind of, he's really good at taking a theme down to its bare essentials and really kind of working with that. And it's kind of interesting to me also, I guess a year after this, he actually got Ennio Morricone to do the score to The Thing, and to me that actually sounds more like a Carpenter score than an Ennio Morricone score, like significantly. So yeah,
Carpenter inserting his own little cues into the Morricone score, so
right.
He went back and tweaked with it, so we have what you can tell.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, do you think that's the appeal of Carpenter as a composer?
Well, I would say he's minimalist up to a point. I think that changes a bit when you get to the later stuff. I think once you hit Big Trouble in Little China, it changes. Christine is kind of the end of that wave.
Right.
But once kind of that swaggering kind of rock sound comes in, like at Big Trouble and They Live, that's a little different. In The Mouth of Madness, definitely not. I mean, he's doing a full-on metal score in that one.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the whole thing. And Prince of Darkness, too.
Yeah. For me, the masterpiece of Carpenter and Howard, The Prince of Darkness, I think that's just an epic. I think it's an incredible score. And it doesn't do that where it has like a really simple theme for characters or for certain ideas. I think that's just that's almost like a symphony. Like it's like a synthesizer symphony.
Right.
It just builds and builds and builds and builds. I think that's a remarkable piece of work between the two of them. So partially, yes. I'd say 50%, yes. Yeah.
I love those early scores so much. Like I Assault on Precinct 13 is just incredible.
Yeah. That's as minimal as you can get too.
Right. And I mean, it's so effective. So yeah.
It helps you memorize it too, I think. I think if you're too complicated in a score, you don't hum it as much. You don't get it stuck in your head. And a lot of the 80s movies were kings of getting the score stuck. And 70s, I would say, too. Mm-hmm. I mean, Taxi Driver scores in my head forever, and it's not overly complicated. It's just really good. Yeah, so I'm thinking of Christine. Christine is still in my head. Yeah, like it's and like if they would have been more complicated, I wouldn't have remembered it. Right. Yeah, that's the same thing, too. He did the same thing with Christine. You hear that, you think of the fucking car.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Halloween was really smart with this franchise, and Friday the 13th did it too. They kept the themes and the score throughout the franchise, and that was the biggest mistake that Nightmare on Elm Street 2 made. Even though the Christopher Young score is great in Part 2, you should have never left that Bernstein score, because that is the whole Suburban Nightmare soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly.
And they abandoned it in the first. I don't know what the. Sometimes you're just so baffled. Like I like Nightmare 2, but you're just like. The choices you've made are maybe the worst. You got lucky this turned out to be a good movie, but you made some really stupid fucking choices right off the bat.
Well, Child's Play did the same thing. It's like the Camellia jettisoned that great closing theme that they had, which would have been a great Chucky theme, and they just ignored it when it switched over to Universal. Like they were like, let's start over. So there's no musical continuity whatsoever in that series.
So bizarre. Yeah, I can't think of a Child's Play theme. You know what I mean? Every big franchise has a theme, except Texas Chainsaw and Child's Play. They don't have their themes. Yeah.
By the way, just that I was really surprised when I saw when John Carpenter went on tour, singing live. I was really surprised that the one real stomper that kind of stole the show was actually at the end when he did Christine. That I would have been Halloween, but he actually sort of tucks in the middle of the show, but he closed it with Christine with good reason.
Right.
So there's no reason when you hear that live, it's just like your heart just goes into your mouth. I don't know why that is, but it's really, really cool when they do that live.
Yeah. Who would have ever thought that we'd be at a point in life where we had seen John Carpenter perform live? Like, just in the past decade, I've seen Goblin multiple times. I've seen Fabio Frizzi multiple times. I've seen Alan Howarth, John Carpenter. I mean, it's been insane. Like, those are the kind of things that growing up watching these movies, you would have never in a million years dreamt that you would be able to do. And just kind of shows how crazy fandom's gotten in the last, 20 years, and how lucky we all are that it has kind of blown up to like this sort of level that we can do those sorts of things now.
I'm waiting for the Harry Manfredini tour.
Right. I'm waiting for Oliver. I'm waiting for the Oliver Onions US show.
So it's the same 37 songs told in different Hey, is this one from The Children or Friday the 13th?
Right.
Yes, you say yes.
That's right. That's Zombie Island Massacre. You got it wrong.
Right.
No, I love those Carpenter scores, especially he did the Halloween 3 score too, I imagine. Yes, he had to.
Yeah.
Because that and Christine both have my friend always loved this about him. They did always a like, and then the head beams on every movie. There's a you're like, what the hell is that? Like that was as a staple for Carpenter, I think, with the score.
The lens flare stinger.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, am I being shot with an invisible laser?
Yeah, just something I just want to mark on. Something else that I kind of like about this film is the fact that even though it makes no logical sense, the fact that they dropped the song Mr. Sandman in is kind of like the unofficial theme song at the very beginning and the ending. It's kind of neat because it makes no sense. It's not connected to Michael in any way. Like I said, you'd think it'd be in a Freddy Krueger movie because it has more to do with that. But it's just kind of a spooky sounding song. I don't know why. It just has like a really sad quality to it. So it actually works. And the fact they used it later on, I think H2O, like they sort of pick it up just very briefly in that one as well, that it's become this kind of unofficial little kind of jingle for the series in a way, along with Silver Shamrock, that as well, that they have a song. And if they don't drop any other songs into the movie, like you would think, because Halloween, they're driving along listening to Blue Oyster Cult. Like I would have thought that when Melissa and Shoop jumps in the car, they would have dropped maybe a little pop song in there, but it never happens again. There's no other like sung music in the movie except for Bud singing Amazing Grace.
Right.
Doesn't count.
Right.
That is strange. Because usually a lot of the movies either have like all the tons of songs needle drops or none, and this one has one. Yeah,
and it being presented as the bookends just does kind of make it more noticeable too that the rest of the movie is kind of bereft of any sort of pop songs.
For sure. And I mean, if you would have asked me what songs in Halloween 2, I would have known right away. Without seeing it in 20 years, I was in Mr. Sandman. I mean, just.
So two more cast member things I did want to mention. Anya Alicia. She is the nurse who gets the hypo in the head. She actually did go on to a major television career. She was on Falcon Crest for like 6 or 7 years or so, nominated for a couple like Reader's Digest awards or something. Still not much film work, but at least she was out there. In the interview that she has on the featurette on this, she looks amazing. Like probably even better than she did back in 1981. Like I saw her.
I didn't know who it was. I was like, who's that? Who is that?
Right.
Like they had to be a kid when I watched it, and I was just like, what? I was
like,
I'm over here looking like beef jerky at 37. This lady's like 78. She's found the fountain of youth. I don't know what's going on.
So, and I guess we'd be remiss if we did not talk about the greatest named human being of all time, and that is Mr. Dick Warlock. Which, I mean, Jesus Christ, could you have a cooler name? I don't know. So there's obviously some discussion of who's the better shape, Dick Warlock or Nick Castle from the first movie. Where do you guys weigh in on that?
Hi.
I've never been one of those guys that gets like really obsessed with who's behind the mask. I do think that they both were fine when I watched the movies, no complaints. If I would have noticed something I didn't like, I would have been like, that guy's a terrible stuff, or that guy's not doing a very good job. But I have no complaints. But that's also a lot of how it's shot too and edited.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Dick Warlock gets way more screen time in this though, so in a way it's kind of an unfair comparison because Michael isn't really in Halloween that much when you really break it down by minute by minute. Whereas, he's in this one a lot. I mean, he's much more physically active in this one. I mean, he's sort of prowling around stalking people a lot more in this. So, I mean, Dick and Ray has the leg up, you might say, and you certainly see a lot more of his feet. But I gotta say, it's about even. I really think they both do a great job.
Yeah, I think that Castle made some interesting, good choices in the first one. Like, obviously, the big one's going to be like the head tilt look,
which is 45 years of character development that the fans put on it. That's I always make the joke. I'm like, how much do Halloween fanatics put on that head tilt? Everything. Like you see, it's like you wrote an entire essay about the head tilt.
Right.
But Dick does that too, though, after the hypodermic, because he
does
sort of a science experiment because he plugs her in the eyeball and he kind of goes like, okay, I want to see what happens now. Like,
It's I mean, it's. Right, like you said, it's such a different movie at points. There is a lot more emphasis on him being a killer, just walking around, stalking the victims. He does have more screen time in this, so it is, with him having more screen time, right? It's gonna kind of take away some of the mystique of the character, I believe.
He's also more of a stuntman. Like, I don't
Right.
think Nick Castle was really a stuntman. Dick Warlock's been in a million. He's done a million things. He's a stunt guy, so he's doing everything. He's also like, hey, I'm gonna actually do the physical stuff and choreograph all this stuff as well. So I mean, they could do more with him. They could do whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was brought into this to do the stunts, and basically was like, hey, is there any reason I can't do this as well? And they're like, sure, whatever. So yeah, Rosenthal just kind of just said, gave him the keys to the castle.
I think one of my favorite Dick Warlock moments in the
gave him the keys to Nick's castle. Sorry,
I love
that was bad.
I got to give Dick a shout out. I think one of my favorite Michael moments.
I bet you do.
Is the scene where Laurie, where she's hiding in the car and she comes out and Donald Pleasence pulls up, and there's that great long shot. It's very Argento-ish also, with the red lighting in the background, where he's walking across the parking lot.
Right.
And the way it's so, he's like the shark in Jaws, but he's just so like laser focused on her. There's something really terrifying about that moment when Laurie's like, and I kind of like that even better than in the first one when she's pounding on the neighbor's doors.
Right.
But the way that he's sort of walking towards the camera, it really creeps me out. There's something about the gait when he's walking. It's really, really spooky. And I mean, you kind of really feel for Jamie, like why she's like getting more like, James, open that door,
Right.
You feel there's something about that, the way he plays that scene, that I really love.
Yeah, it's kind of like that in the elevator scene too, where he's just kind of like that, right? Like you said, laser focus, just like that's where I need to be.
Beelining right for no matter what.
Exactly.
Just going, one thing I didn't mention, but just I don't know if you can put this in or not. Going back to the cast of Halloween 2, we're talking people who did other stuff, but I kind of, as I alluded, one of my favorite characters is Mrs. Owls, but I do want to give a huge shout out to Gloria Gifford, who plays that part, because that was originally written to be a much older character. It was written colorblind, could have been a white woman or a black woman, but the fact that they cast a young, drop-dead, gorgeous black actress in that role seems so strange if you read the script, but it's absolutely perfect for some reason. I don't know why it is, but I think she's great in it.
Right.
She's good.
She plays as like a curmudgeonly, like matron type. I think it's I don't know why, but it absolutely works. But she's a really wonderful actress. She doesn't really get her due. She's in stuff like Bust and Loose, tons of TV shows. But she has a lot of theater stuff here in LA. She pops up all the time. She's a total sweetheart. But I think it's a shame that she kind of rose right after like the height of the Pam Grier era, because I think had she done like a glam action film, she would have killed it. I really wish she had a chance to be a star, because I think she's really underrated. But she's one of the things I really love in the movie. I really just love Gloria Gifford to death. And I'm actually another one I wish she hadn't died. It's a great scene where he finds her on the table, like all her blood out. But,
and like you said, a lot of her best moments in the movie, a couple of her best moments in the movie did hit the cutting room floor. So unless you're watching the deleted scenes or the TV version, you might not even have those bits to her.
Yeah, she has some hilarious gags that got cut out, which is getting blood and all that. Yeah, some really great stuff.
Yeah, she's good at it. I mean, and I also like they were. I remember I just listened to Hysteria Continues podcast to see what they said about it when I was at work today, just to fill in. And they mentioned like they were like, well, we actually like her, and like people said she's like a jerk or whatever. And it's just like as you get older, you realize it's like no, like I would have been the same way. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
10 minutes late. You know what I mean? About me, like it's just like you just get older and you become more.
He's like, yeah, you're late. The kids are gonna die. Don't go fucking in the hot tub again.
Yeah, seriously. It's just like,
what else can you do?
So do you guys think it was a good choice to make the sister brother angle? And I know that's a big controversy about the series forever.
I don't really. I mean, I guess it was kind of put in there to explain why he had such an obsession with following her, which, I mean, if he is trailing her in the second movie, I guess, I guess I can sort of see the reasoning behind it, but at the same time, I think it's much creepier just for it all to be basically pointless, for there to be no reason behind it. He's just killing, he is evil. So yeah, I don't necessarily think that it was the best idea. I'm not quite as much of a hater against it as a lot of people seem to be. I'm kind of just like whatever. But I think it's a little silly.
I think it's just unnecessary. Like, I think it's a scarier idea. They could have had the exact same film, but I think it would have been creepier having Laurie just be the one that got away, and that's why he's going to the hospital. Like, that to me is spooky. That plays into what's it. Because, again, serial killers were really becoming part of the news around that time. And the fact that the word that you could just at random, you could be out there and just some crazy guy could, like, just set his sights on you was something that a lot of people, especially women, were being warned all the time. Like, this is out there. Don't get in your vans in the parking lot. Yada, yada. There were all these rules people were being told. Right. And that's much creepier, I think, and giving it this sort of family link. You don't need it. There was no reason to introduce it.
And I think that's a good kind of change over from the 70s nihilism all the way to the 80s supernatural kind of crazy stuff like that, because the 70s would have just been that. But even in 1980, there was killers that were just hyper focused, like Nicholas Worth and Don't Answer the Phone. He's like, I want to kill this lady who's on the psychiatrist, and what even just people get hyper focused. Visiting Hours is the same. That's 82 though. He's just after her. You know, it just happens. People in general life get focused on one person or obsessed with one person. It happens all the time. So I don't know why he thought that the brother sister angle was necessary.
Right.
And this was also right after sort of the idea of stalkers had kind of become a thing because John Lennon had just been shot. I mean, things like the Rebecca Schaefer thing, Dominic Dunn. I mean, you had like all of a sudden that famous people were just getting killed for no reason by people they didn't even know. So to me, that's much more chilling. I think
right. And the Halloween series being no stranger to the stalking a few installments later with Danielle Harris and her, some of the traumatic incidents from her life. Or
Friday 13th with Ray-Jan King. She got stalked, and that's the same deal. So, I mean, it's literally happening in real life at that time on a franchise that you're lifting from a little bit that was inspired by. It's all like cannibalistic and incestuous in that aspect and weird. It's like art being life and then taking from everything.
Right.
Well, Taylor did from a whole movie about it. I mean, because he got stalked in New York, and that was what turned into Tenebrae. He wrote a whole script based on that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So I know you had mentioned the TV version. So I guess we can jump into that for a bit. Nathaniel, do you want to talk about Universal and their TV versions and why that was even a thing? Or they seem to be, out of all the studios, they seem to be the one that really kind of went haywire with TV versions.
Well, so going back a bit, Universal was really the first studio that went whole hog into made-for-TV movies. Like when that became a thing, when they were trying to compete with the big screen, they would actually make their own movies. With like big stars, they would spend big budgets on them. So especially in the late 60s, early 70s, they were really all gung-ho about this. But they also had this whole department that was dedicated to sprucing up their theatrical films for TV, which is why you would get things like the last two airport films, or but you would get these weird mutations. I mean, the most extreme one being a 2-minute warning, where they overhauled the entire plot. Or Earthquake, for example, they would go out and they would shoot like a whole subplot with Victoria Principal. So this was something they would do a lot, so they could sell these things as being events on television. And so they were all, Halloween wasn't their film, but obviously when they were shooting Halloween 2, they had John Carpenter go and shoot a couple of extra scenes that he didn't really need, but some more stuff with Laurie and BJ Souls. And so when Halloween 2 came around, it was so reworked heavily in the editing room because they wanted to make it more of a competitor to all these slasher films that they cut out a lot of material. And in a way, I think Halloween 2, in a sense, is kind of an unfinished film because it's not really a director's vision. It's kind of something they were tinkering with till the very last second, which you can see because if you watch the theatrical cut, I mean, there were a ton of editing goofs. And Mark Goldblatt, who was the primary editor on that, is like one of the greatest editors out there. I mean, this is the guy who judged these films. So this isn't Mark Goldblatt's cut of the movie, but I mean, you can see goofs in there that really shouldn't have come in there. And things like that slipped through because they kept messing with it till the last second.
Well, one of the biggest ones that I noticed even just last night watching it was the fact that the hospital, all the lights are off. And you're like, why the hell is this? Like, like I said, I work in the hospital and there's no corridors that are just pitch black like that. And then you watch the deleted scenes and, the stuff from the TV version. And there's a whole scene there about the lights going out specifically. And that's why there's no lights on in the hospital.
And not just that's the biggest scene they cut out. So when they did the TV cut, they not only did they put the scenes back in there, but they also reshuffled the movie a little bit. Here's a key to watching the Halloween 2 to make sense. If you watch the theatrical, you know something's off because in the original Halloween, you had movies in the background playing in sequence. You had them watching Forbidden Planet and The Thing from Another World. Mm-hmm. Halloween 2, what you presume is the third feature of that night, is Night of the Living Dead. And as you're watching it, you're like, Night of the Living Dead is playing way out of sequence in this movie because all of a sudden, like, things that happen in the middle of the movie are at the beginning, and then suddenly the credits are starting, and it's like, you're like, what is happening here? Like, did the TV station mix the reels up? Like, what the hell?
Right.
And that's because they were shuffling scenes around to the last minute in theatricals. So that's why you have Mrs. Alves, Elrod, Mrs. Elrod. She's making her sandwich, and you've got a later scene from Night of the Living Dead. They're already at the end of the graveyard scene at the beginning of Halloween 2, which makes no sense. So if you watch the TV cut, everything is back more in the order it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing is they filled in those plot holes. There's a major scene they never ever should have cut, where Michael cuts the power after he kills the security guard, where he cuts the power to the hospital, and then generator kicks in. And at the same time, what's also important is that's when they give Laurie a second shot, and that's why she suddenly starts acting all woozy and out of it.
So drugged out, right?
Yeah, in the theatrical, she's totally sharp. She's like da-da-da, and all of a sudden, for no reason, she starts like being like, ugh, I can like barely walk. And you're like, what's going on here? So it makes way more sense that way, and they never ever should have cut that scene out. It makes no sense. And there's a lot of other stuff, like there's a scene with Donald Pleasence where he's talking to his new sidekick about, how they're tracking Michael and why they go back to the Myers house where he's explaining all this stuff. Whereas in the theatrical, they're just kind of bopping around at random. They're like teleporting around Haddonfield, no rhyme or reason. So it's really important stuff that they added back in there. And on top of that, we should mention that there was stuff Rick Rosenthal shot that we had never seen. I'm afraid that it went up in that Universal fire. It's probably gone for good.
Right.
But the whole scene with Pamela, Susan Shoop, like we mentioned, where she is walking into the car and whining about, oh, he's in Russellville. That whole conversation was shot by Carpenter, which segues into the kid with the boombox. That was all a reshoot because what was originally supposed to happen was it was going to follow that reporter who's in front of the house. You notice there's the blonde reporter talking when they find Loomis's body.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea was that Michael was actually going to jump into her car and that he actually catches a ride and that he murders her. Like he actually sabotages the car. She gets off at the side of the road. He kills her. And she was supposed to have some banter with Dana Carvey, who plays her cameraman. You'll notice he has a pretty prominent credit.
Yeah.
You only see the side of his face for a second.
I was going to say, after I watched it last night, I saw his name in the credits. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. So that's why, Dana Carvey, it's like you blink and he's gone. But he originally had a much more substantial part because he was actually packing up and talking to her and getting in the car. And all that stuff is in the novel, which was written by Jack Martin, which is really Dennis Etchison, who also wrote the Fog novelization. But if you read the book, that's much closer to what Rick Rosenthal had in mind. And so if you watch the TV version, that's kind of in the ballpark of what his cut would have been. It's not quite because it has all the reshoots, but at least it gives you kind of an idea of how it would have flowed. And it makes more sense. It just doesn't have all the nudity and the gore and all that stuff and the profanity. So the fun stuff's gone, but ideally, you fuse them together, you get a pretty good idea.
Yeah, and you've made a fan version of the film, which shows that you have way more obsession with this than I do. And is that
movie by heart?
Right? Yeah. So is that basically what you did? Did you structure it as much as you could around the novelization, or?
I pretty much It's if you follow the novel. I took the novel, the script, the TV cut, and the theatrical, and kind of figured out how would this, if this really was picking up at the last second of the original Halloween, how would it flow? So it was more following the structure of the original movie, where it actually made sense. And making it where all the disruptive crap, all the editorial mistakes were gone, and sort of making it the best movie it could possibly be. That was kind of my.
So which ending did you put on it? Did you put on the mysterious melancholy ending of Jamie Lee Curtis going away by herself, or the one where Jimmy kind of pops up with one last jump scare? His head all bandaged, finding out that no, he might be severely concussed, but he is alive.
I went with the happy ending because I think after going through all that hell over one night, Laurie deserves some happiness.
Yeah, I like the alternate ending a little bit better. Right, I think the jump scare actually is kind of funny.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of Jimmy still being alive because he is a nice character. He has kind of a crush on her, I think I do just like that a little bit better.
Yeah, the scene where I think one of the worst moments in Halloween 2 that it's just so clunky is when Laurie's hiding in the car and all of a sudden this reshoot where Lance Guest climbs into the car and he clunks his head on the whole. It's so dumb. I don't know why they. That's the last time you see him in the theatrical. So you're is he dead or what?
Right.
I can't assume he's dead. Not in a slasher movie. That's not a slasher kill. And it's also weird that Friday the 13th Part 2 has the boyfriend disappearance thing. Right. There's two characters. Both the movies share so much DNA. It's so weird. and I guarantee they didn't really see the same movies. Cat's over here causing a problem. Just pushing him out of light. Get out of here. But no, it's just some of the kills are even similar. Ralph gets strangled, and then Leo Rossi gets strangled. So it's just one's much more gratuitous. Friday's that's one of the best kills with Crazy Ralph biting.
So speaking of gratuitous, so that is kind of one of the other things that kind of differentiates at least some of this movie compared to the first movie. They did kind of spruce up some of these kills. Most of them seem pretty, especially these days. There was outcry about them adding violence to it at the time, but honestly, most of it's not that excessive these days, with the exception of the hot tub scene, which just might even feel sleazier these days than it did back then, of just a topless woman just having her head dunked in until her face melts off. Do you think that might be a little? Do you think that scene might go a little too far for the movie? Do you think that it's the cry, especially the 80s cries of misogyny? Do you think they're founded with this scene, or do you think it's just whatever?
Well, that's also another scene where Michael is supernatural because his hands are down in the water with her, and he's
right? Yeah,
not a single burn on him. So, yeah, I think it's a great scene. And again, that's also the scene where you also have the obligatory nude scene, which the original Halloween also has like a fair amount of nudity in it, which people are they talk about had such a restrained film. Like, yeah, but it does have quite a bit of toplessness. At least Halloween 2 balances the scales because you get Pamela, Susan, Shoop, and Leo Rossi both get naked, so at least it's fair trade there. But yeah, I think it's just a shocking scene. Again, it's a call to Deep Red, and also the fact that John Carpenter, I think, had a sense of humor because, again, that scene that he reshot, the first time you see her, where she's walking in the car and she's like, no more bobbing for apples, especially not at Jimmy's house, the fact that she gets killed basically by bobbing for apples in the tub, I think, is like just kind of a sick touch.
Right. Speaking of apples, I do want to throw a shout out to my favorite traumatizing moment from watching this film as a child. It's literally on screen for 2 seconds. The kid that shows up to the hospital with the razor blade stuck in his fucking teeth. I don't know if this was still something that was going around when you were trick-or-treating, Dave. Yeah. But definitely when we were kids, that was the big thing, right, from parents, where don't eat apples if you get them for trick-or-treating. There's psychos out there that put razor blades in apples. So just having that visualized in Halloween 2, when I first saw that as a kid, I'm just like, oh my God, like this is the most horrifying goddamn image of the entire film to me.
Didn't Night of the Demons scare you more?
No, because that one just seemed phonier. You know what I mean?
No, that's realistic. They come out like this too.
Yeah, this one just seems so realistic and so perfect, and so like that's what would happen. And just you can almost picture like the amount of pain from having that razor blade up right between your two front teeth.
Who's the crazy person that gives you an apple on Halloween? I've never had anyone. I've had people give me a popsicle, change, but never an apple.
We definitely had people. I have definitely got apples when I was a kid. Not many, but there'd always be like some grandparent out somewhere that like didn't want kids to have candy. They wanted to give like a healthy alternative, so they'd give you an apple, and usually you would end up like throwing that at your friends or something,
or throwing it right back at their house. I never.
But that is a little urban legend though, because again, like it was something that went around. I also, when I was a kid, they would say that they had razors in your candy, and it's worth noting they don't actually say that the kid got the razor from an apple. You just assume it because everybody knew that at the time.
Yeah, right.
There's something you sort of fill in the blanks, but again, that was just something that went around. I mean, I never saw a single incident of that actually happening in real life.
Never, right?
Yeah, the only time it actually did happen was the father poisoned his own kid's candy to get rid of him. And it did happen once, but he did it himself. He poisoned his own kid's candy to kill him and blame it on somebody on Halloween.
Right.
So, speaking of the hot tub burn face, it's very reminiscent of another murder kill this year in Absurd. Joe Diamato's Absurd with the stove.
Very face in the oven, right? Yeah.
Same kill, basically, except one's water, one's in the oven. And they're both really nasty. They're both the scenes where you're like, we can wrap this up. That's,
I love Absurd. Unfortunately, Halloween 2 does not have anyone sitting around watching a football game eating spaghetti.
Unfortunately, it does not. The Super Bowl.
My kind of Super Bowl party, right? Plate full of spaghetti.
Be more enjoyable.
Which is also very heavily Halloween influence, especially the score in Absurd is like very John Carpenter. So
yeah. Great score, too. Yeah.
It is just Halloween. They even have Edmund Purdom being Donald Pleasence in it.
Yeah, pretty
Not
much.
As effective, of course, but I guess we should mention Donald Pleasence. I guess his output in '81. He also had The Monster Club, where he plays a vampire hunter, and Jamie Lee Curtis had Road Games. So they both were a little more active than typical, but not. Jamie Lee Curtis slowed down. She had 3 the year previous, right?
Yeah, well, I think she and then she not far after this, I think she kind of moved into comedy. John Landis had directed her in that Coming Soon Universal trailer compilation, where she was the host of that after, kind of becoming a bit of a scream queen from her horror films. So, yeah, John Landis had directed her in that thing, which is kind of a boring watch these days because, you've seen all the trailers a billion times and they're all just Universal stuff. But, he said from palling around with her in between takes, he saw that she was actually really funny. And I guess that's where he got the idea to put her in Trading Places, which kind of launched her career in a whole different trajectory, at least for a few decades.
Yeah, and she was trying to do dramas too, because she played Dorothy Stratton for TV, and she did things like Love Letters. I mean, this was Halloween 2 in a way was kind of her saying like, okay, this is it. This is my swan song as a horror actress, which we all know that turned out.
Right.
But, at least for a while, that was the case.
Yeah, which is a shame. I mean, she's really good in the fall. I mean, probably better in the fall. Than this. I mean, she's kind of very limited in this, but that's just how the character is. There's not really much you can do when you're comatose for half the movie. But yeah, she's great in Road Games. Yeah. She
gets a little back and forth in Road Games, more so than you would typically in a horror film. I mean, it's a thriller, but it's a horror, I would say, as well. But her and Stacy Keach are just back and forth almost.
Yeah,
the whole
they're
movie.
great.
So she gets a lot more to do, and the banter's good. It's a good kind of move to comedy if she's gonna,
Right. Yeah, and I think that's why Road Games works, because you actually like the two characters, and I think that really adds to the suspense in the scenes where the killer's after her. You're kind of a little more invested than you would be in something where she's not there as much.
And that's not even really that's not really a slasher movie. It kind of got lumped in with because of her and the fact it's killer, but it's not really all that very slashery. It's kind of the odd man out of that whole run of movies.
Yeah,
it's like a road horror movie. It's more of a thriller than a horror, but I'd put it in a horror category too.
Yeah, that opening scene is so good. With the girl sitting on the bed and like he's got the wire and you see like the glimmer of light off of it and stuff. It's a perfect opening. So good. That's Richard Franklin, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who did what year? Psycho 2. When are
83.
I was gonna say when you get to 83, let us know because I got some words about Psycho 2.
And he also did Link, which I've never watched. I'm looking forward to that for 86.
Link I saw when I was a kid. I remember it being okay. I recently, sometime in the last 3 years or whatever, bought that French Blu-ray of it. That's like that long ass composite version with like a bunch of deleted scenes. But I've not watched it yet. You watched it, didn't you, Nathaniel?
I did, yeah. I would not recommend going with the composite if you haven't seen it. Watch the theatrical. The composite's kind of a tough sit. It's like over two.
Well, I made the mistake the first time I watched Just Before Dawn. I think that DVD when they put it out, and I watched the composite, and I was like, this fucking thing is this drags a little bit. And then I watched the theatrical for 81 again when I rewatched it. I was like, this is excellent. This is a great movie. So I was just like, that was such a bad. I tend to just go theatrical now the first time. And
the Blade in the Dark syndrome.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Which one? The Blade in the Dark?
Yeah.
So Blade in the Dark has a long version.
Yeah.
Lamberto Bava.
So here's the thing. So here's some news from me and Nathaniel's aborted Blade in the Dark commentary, which is totally my fault, but that's a whole nother podcast episode. So the short version of Blade in the Dark is actually Lamberto Bava's director's cut.
Okay.
When they originally filmed Blade in the Dark for TV, they filmed it in different segments. There's supposed to be an episode each night, each one culminating with a murder. The version that's been on every goddamn DVD and Blu-ray has been this like really unwieldy long version where they basically took all that footage and cut it and just smashed it together. That was when it got rejected from a television sale and they went to go sell it in other markets. Lamberto Bava went back to the footage and recut it as a feature and like pulled a lot of the stuff that was redundant and slowed the pace too much and stuff they had issue with. So the shorter version of Blade in the Dark was missing since the VHS and Laserdisc releases until the new Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray and 4K. So we really pushed for them to put the short version on there, which they did. So the short version that's on there is actually the version that you should have been watching this whole time. The reason I really think A Blade in the Dark's reputation has suffered since the DVD era has been because everybody's watching this really bloated long version.
I saw the DVD version of it first too.
Yeah. So if you go back to rewatch it, definitely watch the short version.
I will, because I do remember that movie being just okay.
Mm-hmm. The 96-minute version is fantastic. It's a radical difference.
I bet. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine that movie being longer than 96 minutes. Seriously, thinking about it and what was in it and how it was. Like, that's long.
Yeah, it's like 13 extra minutes of padding in the long version.
It really hurts.
Right.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I feel the same way about Just Before Dawn. I mean, like, it's just better tight.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to touch on Halloween 2?
I only have two more things in my notes. Do we want to talk a bit about the reaction when the movie first came out?
Sure.
How it generally seemed completely negative. I was going to read Roger Ebert's review of it, but I forgot to pull it. So,
well, Roger Ebert was a huge fan of the first one. They did an entire episode basically on slasher films and sort of holding up the original Halloween as an example of how to do it right, and then they trashed everything else. They were also really incensed about things like I Spit on Your Grave, which isn't even really a slasher movie, but they were really anti-horror by the time this came out. But there was a lot of slasher burnout in the air. I remember when this came out, like critics were just pissed, and the MPA was also really pissed off because they were getting so much flack, especially because of Friday the 13th. Because, as we know, it wasn't totally uncut, but they let stuff slide through that people shouldn't have gotten through, which is why Friday the 13th Part 2 really got the brunt of it. But when Halloween 2 came out, you'll notice it's not a particularly gory film, but they really go for some gross out stuff. The razor blade scene, for example, with the kid. The most gratuitous probably being when they first wheel Laurie in and they keep lingering on the needles going in her arm.
Right.
It's obviously there just a good lines go, ew, ew. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that that's just meant to, to do that, or like lingering on on Ben Tremor when he's burning. It goes on and on and on. So I think a lot of critics were kind of taken aback by that. And if you read the reviews, you can tell they were just really ticked off. They'd kind of gotten fed up with all the slasher movies, and they were like, oh, the Halloween series is like fallen. That they're pandering to this demographic now. I think that's what people want. And it was really negative. And I mean, to be fair, it's not a perfect film. I mean, again, like I said, you have to bear in mind what this is when you're watching it. That it is, it is kind of a strange beast without a single creative vision. But I think it deserved better than it got. I think had it come out at a different time, maybe if it had been, the Halloween of 1980 instead, it probably would have been better received. But unfortunately, it came out during this glut. And yeah, when you read Roger Ebert and some of those other critics, you can tell it really didn't even stand a chance. But the fact that it did go for the gross out a few times, I think, was kind of the nail in the coffin with critics.
Yeah, and I think that leads to one of the funniest bits of Roger Ebert's review, which I'm paraphrasing a bit. He says, Halloween 2, while terrible, does contain the one scene I've always expected that start happening in one of these movies, where there's so much blood a character slips and falls in it.
And even knocks himself out.
Right.
Yeah. Or maybe dies, depending on which cut, right?
Depending on how you want to read it.
The thing is, I kind of lost a lot of, I just could tell, it's that deal where they have to act outraged so people tune in. And that was the whole gimmick. We have to act upset, and so people tune in. And the more upset we are, the more people tune in. And they do it now times 10 on the internet. I don't want to get on this thing, but I felt like it was like they complain about that, but then they gave away Betsy Palmer's address. And then after that, I was just like, your opinion means nothing, because you're actually you're putting someone's life at risk, even though somebody from that film franchise had already been stalked. What is wrong with you? Yeah. And they're telling people to be outraged about a movie. It's like, you're putting someone's life in danger. These are all fake movies. So I just kind of lost a lot of I mean, I still enjoy watching them and their take on them, but at the same time, I just can kind of see it just like a smokescreen. It's just kind of bullshit.
Yeah, and
the late 80s, they really didn't even bother to get their facts straight. I remember being really pissed off when they both attacked the Hitcher very vigorously, but the things they were attacking it for weren't even in the movie. They actually got all the facts completely wrong. They actually didn't even describe the opening and the closing correctly. They got it completely switched. And I was like, if you can't even get the simple stuff about the movie right, how do you have any right to pass judgment on it? It made no sense.
Right. Well, and one thing that kind of added fuel to the fire as far as the legacy of Halloween 2 goes. There was a case a few years later, I think around 84 or something, where some California nut job went and murdered an elderly couple. And, he was I think he was on acid or something, went out, killed this elderly couple. When he got captured, he said that, while he was on drugs, he basically had flashbacks to Halloween 2, and that's what caused him to get confused and murder these people. And obviously he was a nut job, and he was arrested. I think he originally got the death penalty, but then it kind of got repealed or pushed back or something. So yeah, I don't know whatever happened with it beyond that. But yeah, I can just say, I'm not going to say I've ever done acid before, but hypothetically, if I were to have, I don't think I would have went out and killed some elderly couple just because of it, hypothetically.
You wouldn't have blamed it on Halloween 2.
I definitely would not have blamed it on Halloween 2.
You would have blamed it on natural born killers.
Exactly.
Something outrageous like that. But no, that's silly. I mean, clearly.
Yeah. Well, and that's unfortunately the 80s were full of that, full of people just trying to blame violent movies or or extreme music for the ills of society. And unfortunately, I was going to say, unfortunately, it seems like that, we still, things have gotten a lot more lenient. I mean, Jesus Christ, you go to the theaters now and the stuff you can see, just the stuff you can see on basic cable is so much gorier and more extreme and more crazed than anything we sat through in the 80s in an R-rated movie.
The Walking Dead. I mean, compare that to like the shit that Savini had to go through on his Night of the Living Dead. I mean, it's like Walking Dead is like hard NC-17 level, and that's on like basic cable.
Right, every week.
Yeah, beat a guy's brains with a baseball bat out. I like literally, and it's just like, So it's so weird. It's silly. We live in a crazy time, and it's always been crazy, right?
Indeed.
So did you guys want to, this is going to be a quick game, better or worse? You guys want to do that? Just for 81 slashers, better or worse? Just no explanation.
I want to see where me and Nathaniel differ. So me and Nathaniel track like probably 95% of the time, like we're, in agreement on movies. But every now and then there's something where we're just like, what?
Last Starfighter. Anyway.
Yeah, right.
You guys want to do slashers or kind of the heavy hitters? Now, this is Internet Movie Database rules.
I'll do both. I don't care.
Then we'll start with the slashers, I think.
Okay, so you're going to name the movie, and I'm going to say we'll say whether we think Halloween 2 is... Are we going to say whether Halloween 2 is better or worse than that movie, or are we saying whether the movie is better or worse than Halloween 2?
Just pick the movie. Just say if you like whichever one you like better, say it. Okay, so Friday the 13th Part 2.
Halloween 2.
That's an evil one.
Well, it's funny because, Friday 13th 2, now that we've finally been able to see it uncut, it definitely has raised in its estimation to me. I do like a lot of things about Friday 13th 2, but I still think I kind of lean a little more Halloween 2, probably because I've loved it longer, if that makes sense. I know Nathaniel's been a huge fan of Friday 13th 2 forever.
By the slimmest of hairs, I'll say Halloween 2, but it's so close.
I would go Friday 2 myself, but I'm trash.
Depending on my mood, I could go Friday 2, depending when you ask.
I was going to say, I was actually surprised by your answer there, Nathaniel. I figured you'd go.
Halloween 2 is the better made film. I will say it has more craft to it.
Okay,
for sure.
But I love them a lot.
My Bloody Valentine.
My Bloody Valentine.
That's easy.
I mean, that's probably in my top 5 slashers of all time, maybe. This one is in my top 20, I would say. But, stuff like My Bloody Valentine, Sleepaway Camp, a few others probably rank higher than it.
The Burning.
Halloween 2.
Halloween 2.
The Funhouse.
Halloween 2. I'm not big on the Funhouse. I've watched it. It seems like I buy it and watch it every time it comes out on a new format, and every time I never like it as much as I want to. And that's another one. Speaking of novelizations, that is one where I read the novelization as a kid, and I feel like the movie never lived up to the novelization.
When I revisited Funhouse, I actually liked it a lot more this time around.
Really?
I like it a lot. I think it kind of drops the ball at the end. That's my problem. It kind of leaves you on like a weird or
actually maybe it wasn't a novelization, because that's a Dean Koontz book in the first place, right?
Yeah, it's radically different.
Okay, so yeah, I read the book and the movie was not the book.
Yeah, well, this was back when that was pretty common, because Jaws 2 is the most famous example where you get the novel and it has almost nothing to do with the movie, because it had been so many times, it's not even the same story anymore.
Yeah. Well, I can remember reading the Friday 13th Part 6 novelization when I was a kid, and before I'd even seen the movie. And I remember then going to see the movie. I'm like, wait, where's all the stuff about Jason's dad? I'm like, the book has the book has all this stuff about the caretaker being Jason's dad and all this stuff having to do with that, and the movie has none of that.
The Prowler.
The Prowler is another one. I go Halloween 2. The Prowler is another one that a lot of people seem to love, but I basically only like it for the effects. I think, yeah, they're great effects, but as a movie, I think it's like an upper middle level slasher. It's not quite in that upper tier for me.
I would also go Halloween 2, and the Prowler also suffers because it's similar to My Bloody Valentine, which is vastly superior. So yeah.
Happy birthday to me.
Ooh. I'll let Nathaniel go first.
I'm still going to go Halloween 2. I think Happy Birthday to Me has major pacing problems, but I love it. I do love it.
Yeah, I just rewatched. So I just rewatched Halloween 2. I mean, Happy Birthday to Me not that long ago. I may go Halloween 2 as well. I do feel, though, if we were to ever see the uncut Happy Birthday to Me, that might change.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of stuff I really like about Happy Birthday to Me. That whole climax, the last like 20 minutes of that movie are just bonkers.
Yeah,
It's a weird movie.
So yes,
Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, kind of a slasher.
Yeah, Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker easily. That's another.
Absolutely.
That's another maybe top 5 slasher.
It's a classy one. This one I don't know if I'd call it a slasher exactly. I'd say it's supernatural. Dark Knight of the Scarecrow.
Ooh, Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Dark Knight's a better movie. It's funny. I just rewatched that like a few months back, and I was just like, God, this is really a great movie. I don't consider it a slasher movie, but it's a good one.
Madman.
Halloween 2. I do really like Madman, though. I do have a special affinity for Madman. A lot of people don't, but I actually really kind of enjoy it.
Madman.
I like Madman. Madman actually makes the mistake that Halloween 2 avoids, which is that they both take place. Well, except for that one scene, they both take place entirely at night. But the problem is, Madman looks like it was shot entirely at night.
Right.
Sleepy after a while, it's so dark. Like,
and it's outside too. So
yeah, I'm just like after I'm like, my God, can you just turn the lights on for a minute? Like, just get my eyes burnt. Like
that's one of those things where Halloween 2's budget really came into play. You know, they were able to light things and shoot it properly, as compared to some of these fly-by-night indies that just look cheap.
Just Before Dawn.
Just Before Dawn.
Yeah, the short version. Yeah.
Hell Night.
Halloween 2.
Hell Night.
Oh, wow.
That's a crazy one.
Okay. What I like about Hell Night is with all the costumes and everything, it almost plays out like a gothic thriller, but it's a slasher movie. I kind of like, the locale that they're in and all the costumes and everything. It's like the director had a boner for gothic thrillers and really wanted to figure out a way to make a modern gothic. So I do like that aspect of it. And some of the kills are actually pretty good. Like, I love the one with the head where they chop the head and the body falls and the head's like still up there. I thought that was like really good. But I think I do like probably the brisker pace of Halloween 2. Although, actually, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, I mean, even like Van Patten's good, and Linda Blair's a little limited, but she kind of always was.
I love Linda Blair in this movie. I'll tell you what. Well, first of all, Hell Night I think has one of my favorite scares. I think the scene with the rug. That's all I'm gonna say.
I don't even remember it.
What's the scene where he's under the trap door and he comes up and the rug suddenly rises up behind him?
Right. Okay. Yes, I do. Yes.
Great moment. I can't believe
that's a good one.
But Hell Night, just alone, it has like a scene that I'd always wanted to see in a movie, and they delivered it. And that's in the climax when daylight is breaking and she's running outside and she gets in the car and it won't start, and she jumps out and she fixes the damn car. And I was like,
they set that up earlier too.
Yeah, they set it up because she has mechanic training, and I was like, thank God, finally someone did it. Like, I love that moment so much.
That's funny.
I guess this one I don't even know. Some people consider it a slasher. I don't really. Bloody Birthday.
I like Bloody Birthday, but I probably go Halloween 2. I do the kids running around with like bow and arrows and stuff and just murdering everybody. It's really fun. Like, Bloody Birthday is really a fun movie, although this is probably the better film.
Yeah, it's a fun one. It's a weird like killer kid slasher hybrid, which I guess by the time you get to stuff like Orphan later on, there's no division anymore. But
right, or Devil Times 5 and
but yeah, I would definitely go Halloween 2 though.
I think we're hitting the tail end here, and I heard you guys making jokes about it. Final Exam. I like the movie. No one else likes it.
I know. So speaking of movies that I seem to purchase on every single goddamn format it comes out on, that I don't like. Final Exam's a fucking mess. But that opening bit with the college prank with that's borderline terrorism.
It's a prank, though. It's the 80s.
Borderline, it is.
It's a prank. It's just bad 80s pranks, the movie. There's just so many of them. It
is so funny. My biggest problem with that, besides the fact that it's boring and like there's hardly any murders and they're not like gory, the fact that the killer comes in and it's like somebody who has no relation to anything else from the entire movie, pretty much. He's just like this dude that just shows up. At least that's how I remember it. But yeah.
That's right. He's just a guy.
Right. Yeah, I'm not big on Final Exam.
I like it more than you do, but I would still definitely go Halloween 2.
Right.
The fact that it was shot in my old like college stomping grounds kind of makes me a little softer on it.
Right.
I kind of like the vibe, even though, like I said, it's very uneventful for the most part, and it definitely skims on the blood. But I don't know, there's something kind of cozy about it that I like, so I still kind of get a kick out of it.
I like the characters.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of it. There's a lot of character development. There's a lot of it.
I was gonna say you better like the characters because that's what you got. So,
student bodies.
Halloween 2 definitely, but Student Bodies is still kind of fun.
I love it.
Yeah, it's funny. I just rewatched that too within the past year, and yeah, there's a couple silly parts of that just had me howling, but for the most part, it's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, the first minute of Student Bodies I think is actually pretty fantastic, and it has one of the funniest moments of any movie ever, which is when the guy cuts into the middle of the movie with the R rating. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, fuck!
I don't want to ruin it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry. Let's relax. Let's take this moment to say. Fuck you.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Nightmares in a Damaged Brain.
Oh, I go Nightmares. I love that diseased, sick ass movie.
Wow.
Yeah, to me, Nightmares is almost like oppressively mean. It's like
it's I'm still gonna go Halloween 2 on that one. I do like Nightmare a lot.
Right.
I do like it.
You better. You just wrote the liner notes.
I know. I do. I'm in the book, so I should probably say Nightmare. I'm nothing released ever. I do love it, but I still go Halloween 2. I definitely watched it more often. I get more of it. Nightmare is a hard one to rewatch. You got to be in the right mood for it. It
right.
belongs to that same kind of like Maniac, where it's like you've really kind of got to be on that wavelength to get into it.
Right. Don't go in the house and don't answer the phone. And yeah,
Don't go in the house is real fucking ugly.
Yeah,
that's an ugly one.
Yeah. Love it though. Love it.
Oddly enough, Don't Go in the House is probably my favorite of those, and it's grown over the years. It didn't used to be, but like that's the one I really appreciate more every time I watch it.
Right.
I think it's probably the best movie of the bunch. It has the less because Nightmares has the melodramatic stuff, which is a bit cheesy, and Don't Answer the Phone. Nicholas Worth's best performance. That's the best performance in all those movies. Yeah. But at the same time, it has the cop stuff, and the cop stuff is it's like The Last House on the Left stuff, which I love that movie, and I always forgive it, and I forgive Don't Answer the Phone. But totally, even that late 1980, it was fucking dumb, especially 1980.
So funny enough, so I actually it's weird because I don't mind the cop stuff in Don't Answer the Phone because I actually feel like it connects that movie to Death Wish 2. It has the same cop, it's like the same Hollywood area, has that same kind of like sleazy feel. So I feel like both of those movies are kind of in the same universe. So here's a quick Don't Answer the Phone story. So God, how long's it been, Nathaniel, since we interviewed Nicholas Worth?
It's like early 2000s.
Yeah. So we met up with Nicholas Worth. He was like living at like an old folks home at the time because he moved in there like an assisted living thing with his wife wasn't doing well. She passed away and he ended up still living there. So we went and picked him up at this place for an interview because we did an interview with him for the original Don't Answer the Phone DVD. And that's been reproduced on practically every release of it since, thankfully. So Cliff McMillan, who at the time was working for BCI Eclipse and later went on to Scream Factory and is now at Arrow, he knew somebody who worked at some sort of recording studio or something it was like a dubbing studio and they did like the Boondocks there. They had like the Emmys and stuff sitting up on the wall. Or in like some sort of mantle. So we picked up Nicholas Worth, took him back to this place to shoot the interview with him for Don't Answer the Phone. When we were there, we had to like move some stuff around. And there, we had this big chair that we moved off into a corner just to make it look okay. There was a big dish of little like mini candies that was sitting near there. And he grabbed a couple of them. He was sitting there eating them. Yeah. When the interview was over, Nick was a great guy, super nice, super friendly. When the interview was over, we went to start putting everything back where we could, and we moved the chair back, and underneath the chair was nothing but like a bunch of candy wrappers. Apparently he didn't know what to do with them, so he just started putting them under the chair as he was eating all these candies. Like we wouldn't notice when we had to put it all back. I was like, Jesus Christ, this old guy.
He was one of my favorite actors, honestly. I always loved him. He's just so memorable. Right when I first saw him in Darkman, I was like, I always do the impression of like, hell, I don't even know how I got dressed. I just love his demeanor in that whole part. I know.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Duran. I didn't make the pickup. He's all casual. I think it's not that big of a deal. Then he's like, God, it's Mr. Duran. I don't even know how I got dressed.
It's really funny. He was a really cool dude. Really nice. He didn't have the internet or anything. I originally got his phone number from Bob Murawski, who like bumped into him in Hollywood at some point, and thankfully got his number for me. I used to call after Don't Answer the Phone came out. I would call him like every couple weeks and actually just read him the online reviews of Don't Answer the Phone, just because so many people were like praising specifically his performance and how crazed and good he was. So yeah, I used to call him all the time and just read him the reviews from the internet. And yeah, I'm happy we were able to do that because he died like not that long after. So yeah, I was, we were lucky enough to be able to meet up with him while he was still able to do those things.
Yeah, he was on my list. I would have loved to meet him. I'm happy I got to meet David Hess right before he died. I mean, he was one that I always wanted to meet, and I always wanted to ask them that stupid question. I'm like, so you guys both got shot in a pool in 1980 and fell in there. You guys are rapists that got shot in a pool and died, and then you're in Swamp Thing 2 years later. Did you guys be like, hey, remember when you got shot and died in that pool? I wonder if they ever had that conversation because they're in that movie together.
It's funny enough because they both just popped up in something else I watched. What the hell was it? Moving Violations, maybe? Where like Nicholas Worth's in there as like a transvestite in a porn store or something, and then David Hess,
Armed and Dangerous.
Maybe that's what it was. It was Armed and Dangerous,
and then
David Hess at the end is like some sort of terrorist that shows up during the shootout. I don't even think he has any lines. He's just like appears.
Might be right.
I'm like, is that David Hess? And sure enough, I watched the end credits. So yeah, it was Armed and Dangerous, 100% what it was.
Love that movie, by the way. That's a good one.
It was actually really fun. It was really fun.
We are at a complete diatribe here, but I can't help but go. I love the part where they get reassigned, the security guards, to work in the toxic waste dump. And those two guys come out and they're all like rotting. And they're like, it's like, oh man, he's like, how long you guys been here? Like 5-6 years? He's like, 2. He's like, 2 years? He's like, 2 weeks. And they're like, or 2 days or something.
Right.
We're not working here. That's a funny movie.
Yeah, it was a good time.
What else do we got? Let's just run through these ones real quick. I can't imagine any of these having any love over Halloween 2.
Okay.
So if I name one, that is, just say so, okay?
Good enough.
But we'll go quick. Graduation Day.
I love Graduation Day. Holy shit.
Is it better than Halloween 2?
I don't know.
Nothing's ever simple with you, Bruce.
Look, I know. Look, here's the thing. Sometimes scenes live in my head. That scene with like the band playing in that like tent in the middle of the woods or whatever, or the roller rink. They're at like a roller rink or something, and like the band is playing, and it's like intercut with the girl running naked through the woods. She's like topless, and eventually getting murdered in the woods. That scene is so goddamn good. I really like.
Chop her head off. I think.
Do they, or do they like stab her with a javelin or something? I can't remember. But that scene is so good. I may go Graduation Day. I know. I'm a complicated man.
I'm going Halloween 2. I love Graduation Day, but not as much as Bruce does.
I don't think Bloody Moon's necessarily a slasher, so I'll skip that.
But I think we both, me and Nathaniel, may go Bloody Moon.
I'm going Bloody Moon on that one.
Yeah. It's
got great music.
I was hoping you were going to say Bloody Moon. Yep.
Yeah, we've shared multiple conversations about the greatness of Bloody Moon.
It's a good one, honestly, for Franco too. I mean, I like Franco. Franco's an acquired taste, though.
It's so 100%. Trashy and it's so weird, and the idea of him doing a slasher movie is like, what? But it turns out exactly how you want it to, where it's just like total nonsense, but it's perfect.
It's just 90 minutes of pure entertainment, like
right.
It's more like a gothic movie too, because it's got the weird shit in the beginning with the family and the inheritance and stuff. It's a bizarre film. Night School, which I think is underrated.
Ooh. Night School is really underrated. It's really stylish. It actually has a cool killer outfit, some cool kills, and a good reveal.
Mean Spirited too.
Yes.
Yeah. And the carousel kill is
carousel. What? Yeah, the merry-go-round thing.
That's right. That's the first kill, I think. Yeah.
Is that called a what is that thing called?
That's a merry-go-round. If you spin it yourself, it's a merry-go-round or
And
a carousel.
which one's
Wait.
because one's the one with horses that you ride,
I
like
think
the big
it has-
thing.
it has a- I think it
That's
has
a
top.
carousel.
I think carousel has to have a top on it, and a merry-go-round
Yeah.
is one that you do. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Good enough. All right.
This is the spinny death scene.
the spinny thing, right?
Now I got that really weird, what is that, Wildman Fisher song, merry-go-round, stuck in my head. I don't want to sing it, if you want to call it that.
I might go, depending on my mood. I may go Night School. Maybe. I don't know.
I think Night School is a better movie, but I think that Halloween 2 is maybe more fun to watch. I don't think I could watch Night School 10, 15 times in a row, you know.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I've
Night
definitely
School is one of the funniest slasher scenes of all time, though. I think when it cuts to like the next day and they're wandering around the kitchen, and the severed head somewhere, but it goes on for like.
That's the scene I'm gonna talk, where it's got those two guys that keep coming in. And they're like sitting there like, who's gonna eat this? Who's gonna pull out the nasty hair? Right? You think it's that? Yeah. It drives you crazy.
Yeah, that scene is brilliant.
And the aforementioned Hospital Massacre.
Ugh. Definitely Halloween 2.
Although Hospital Massacre is funnier.
Not purposely.
Right, not on purpose, but it's hilarious.
Absurd.
God. Yeah, I'm a big D'Amato fan, obviously. Yeah, I'm going absurd too. It's gorier, it's nuttier, it's funnier. I love the score. Yeah, I'm going absurd. Plus, you got kids on scooters.
And George Eastman.
George Eastman, yeah. Luigi Montefiore.
The Fan, which is more of a thriller.
Which
but we're
fan?
talking
The Michael
not Der
Biehn
Fan.
one.
That's 82.
Okay.
This one's 81.
Yeah, definitely Halloween 2. Although there are some really funny scenes. Like what's the line? Michael Biehn. What's his like trashy line?
You know, it's like to be fucked by a meat cleaver.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember. I kept wanting to say chainsaw. I'm like, I know it's not a chainsaw.
Fuck Gently chainsaws Heathers.
Exactly. The Fan has some pretty ridiculous parts, but it's not great. I don't think it's
It's good. So I wouldn't say it's great.
Right.
It is the best musical slasher of 1981, though.
The scene in the elevator is pretty well done. If the whole movie had stuff like that, it would have definitely been a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the swimming pool scene is really good, which Lamberto Bava ripped off later on. So yeah.
Right.
This one I think is great. I don't know. I don't hear as much love as it should. Madhouse, the 81 one.
I like Madhouse. I'd go Halloween 2. But yeah, the Video Asinitis one. Yeah, I like that one. But yeah, I think this is better.
Agreed. But yeah,
Don't go in the woods.
Definitely Halloween 2. But I do have a strange affinity for Don't Go in the Woods.
There's a lot of slashers, isn't there?
Yeah, that is. That one is so trashy and so stupid, and it's like characters just get introduced and then die that same scene.
That's the epitome of it. Like,
right.
It's not even like the stuff they say slashers are is don't go in the woods.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's just but I mean, some of the stuff like the guy with the wheelchair and like,
I'm so sick. Every time somebody throws somebody in a wheelchair in a horror movie, you're like, why you gotta do this shit? Like Texas Chainsaw or Friday 2, you're just like, they're fucked, man. What the fuck are you doing?
I mean, just the idea of the guy in the wheelchair is trying to like wheel around the woods and stuff. Like,
why would he go in the
come on,
woods?
right?
It all goes back to Franklin, though, doesn't it? Yeah.
You know, Toby Hooper was cracking up when he was trying to push Franklin around the wheelchair. We'll put him in a wheelchair and he'll be trying to go around the woods. This is so funny. Everyone's gonna find it so funny. Everyone watching, it's like, this isn't funny at all.
Right.
Eyes of a Stranger.
I really like Eyes of a Stranger, and it's funny, I saw Eyes of a Stranger late. I didn't see it till the Warner DVD came out. I always thought I had seen it, and then watching it, I'm like, same. Yeah, I guess I hadn't. It's real sleazy.
You never saw the cut version then?
Correct. Thankfully I'd only seen it uncut, and it's funny because I had, when I was a kid, I was always into special effects makeup, so I had Tom Savini's Grand Illusions book, so I'd even known what some of his effects in the movie were, like the head in the fish tank and stuff, and like because there's all sorts of diagrams and crap about how he made that stuff. But yeah, I didn't actually see the movie until the DVD came out, and I really liked it, and it was probably better that I didn't see it until later, because, you know, had I seen it when I was younger, I probably would have been mad that it wasn't very gory. And the sleazier ones usually didn't have the same appeal to me as a kid. But yeah, seeing it in the 2000s, I was like, oh, this is actually a really solid, you know, pretty mean little movie. So yeah, that's another tough one because I do really kind of like that one. Yeah, speaking now, that would be closer to the original vision of Halloween 2 in a somebody being tormented in a high-rise building.
It's just Rear Window. It's sleazy Rear Window.
Right.
I mean, just break it down. It is, but it's good, and the killer is weird. He's creepy. He's unpleasant.
Yeah. I might now. I probably need to revisit it, but I may go Eyes of a Stranger.
I'm gonna go Halloween 2. I like Eyes of a Stranger a lot, but Halloween 2 I think for me is more fun. Eyes of a Stranger, it has that kind of skeevy thing where it's like you gotta be in the mood for it. I think. But
apparently I'm always in the mood for it.
And we got two more.
Okay.
Everybody's favorite, Home Sweet Home.
The
Body by Jake.
Bodybuilder, right? Body by Jake. I remember it being kind of crap when I saw it on VHS. It's funny. I have that in my Plex to watch queue from your Plex account because I'm in need of a rewatch. I don't remember it being particularly great, but so I'm going to obviously go Halloween 2. But who knows? Maybe on a rewatch for the first time since the mid 90s or maybe even early 90s. Who knows? Maybe I'll find something to savor this time around.
Okay, if there's one left, it better be what I think it is. So.
Oh, you didn't answer this one.
I'm going to say Halloween 2, but I'm thinking out loud because there's only really one I could think of that you haven't mentioned, and of course it's the greatest of 1981 by far. It's the most impeccably made film.
What? Where? Slasher?
Yeah.
All right. What's your last one?
No, it's not this one. I was going to say Love Massacre, which is Hong Kong. Not necessarily a slasher, but
Love Massacre is fucking great. So I thank God that uncut version just popped up on YouTube in the last couple of years. The guy got like some sort of laser disc because the version I watched before that was a tape that was missing like all the violent bits. So the one that popped up on YouTube, he did like new subtitles for it because before you couldn't see any of the subtitles because they were just so blown out in white. Love Massacre is really cool movie. Although honestly, there's not much of a massacre till like there's like one chunk of like once he gets to the building and starts killing everybody. Up till then, it's like just some sort of like weird stalkery relationship drama thing. But that's a really cool movie. I probably still go Halloween 2. But Love Massacre is that's one I would love to see get a good release. Because it almost feels like a Hong Kong art house. I mean, it almost feels like Wong Kar-wai, like, you know, and then suddenly just explodes into like this crazy slasher movie. Start.
He was
right.
Yeah,
because that's what Patrick Tam. Is that Patrick Tam?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Who did like My Heart Is That Eternal Rose? I think.
This Love Massacre is the only movie I'm familiar with off the top of my head that I know.
He did The Sword, which is one of the better like early '80s new wave Hong Kong movies. So yeah. Love Massacre is really cool.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time. I remember liking it, but I need to do a revisit. But definitely Halloween 2. But again, I'd love to see a good, like, quality Blu-ray of it. That'd be nice.
Right. Yeah.
So I was only doing 1981 slashers.
Well, hold on. So hold on. You had that was your last one, Nathaniel. Which one were you thinking?
There's one more.
Which is what?
That makes Final Exam look like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Scream.
Oh, Scream! Right.
Oh, I forgot to mention Scream. I was just going down the first couple pages. Scream. I expected the worst movie ever. So when I watched it, I was like, it's okay. It is okay. That's as nice as I can be. Okay.
I think it makes Final Exam look good.
It's and you bought them both, right, Bruce?
Yeah, I bought both of them. Yes, on UHD because I have self-control problems.
I bought Final Exam on 4K too for this. For 81.
Anybody who follows my Instagram will obviously know I have self-control problems.
Me too.
Right. So yes.
So Scream's better. I'm just kidding.
So what we're saying, right?
What we're saying is, and everybody's so dumb in that movie too. They're like, "Well, I'm gonna go outside." It's like somebody got murdered. I'm going outside. Everybody thinks they're John Wayne or something, and they just die.
So, are we in consensus though that of all the ones you named, that the best one is My Bloody Valentine?
I would say so. Yes.
My personal favorite's The Burning, but I like Friday 2 and My Bloody Valentine and The Burning over, and maybe even Just Before Dawn.
I mean, if I was,
and Happy Birthday to Me over Halloween 2, probably.
Yeah, if I was pressed for it, I mean, is possibly My Bloody Valentine the best 80s slasher? I mean, obviously, if Dave thinks other things are better than it, then not for him. But I mean,
I might be wrong. Like
to me, it's up there with like Sleepaway Camp. Sleepaway Camp's a real wild, sleazy one too. But I think My Bloody Valentine might be better than Sleepaway Camp. Honestly, I really like the characters in My Bloody Valentine. The kills are insane. I like the atmosphere, like the cold and the mines, and yeah.
The characters are great, and plus it has the big guy from Class of 1984. I can't think of his Keith Knight. He's great.
Right.
In that.
Yeah,
he's great in everything. That guy's an underrated character actor for sure.
Agreed.
No, but honestly, if we had to come to a consensus, you know what I mean? Like you're kind of taking your personal opinion a little bit out of it. I would be very perfectly fine with putting My Bloody Valentine as the greatest 80s slasher. I mean, I'd be hard pressed not to pick that, or probably one of the Fridays. Honestly, I would go for 1 or 2 or something like that.
5
or even 4. Honestly,
I think I like 5 better than 2 or 3.
5's my personal favorite, but it's not the best. I can't say that's the best one. I think 2 is probably the best one.
It's such a weird outlier. I mean, it's amazing, but it's not the best Friday the 13th movie. It's probably the most entertaining movie of the bunch, but you wouldn't say start with part 5.
Right?
No, never. Unless you were classy.
I was gonna say right. Unless you really want to fuck with somebody.
We could go over the heavy hitters that aren't the slashers and just do the top 10 heavy hitters they have listed here. If you guys are interested.
I'm sure. I'm game. Whatever.
Do you have time?
Yeah.
Evil Dead.
Oh, Jesus. Evil Dead, definitely.
My landslide.
Yeah, right. I mean, Evil Dead is so insane. Yeah, and I mean, it's. I can remember renting that as a kid. We rented it, me and my buddy James and his older brother Giles. I used to go over there practically every weekend when I was a kid, and we would rent horror movies. We didn't rent Evil Dead until Fangoria started pushing Evil Dead 2 when they were starting to do articles about Evil Dead 2. So we were like, oh, well, let's see what Evil Dead 1 is. And we popped that in and we're blown away. I mean, it is gory as hell. It's insane. Yeah, it's so good, and a lot of people say it's sad that the rest of the Evil Dead franchise did not stay that course. I mean, some can argue that the most recent 2 kind of did because they're meaner and nastier, but the Sam Raimi ones, definitely got more cartoony. I know a lot of people love Evil Dead 2 more than 1, but I'm an Evil Dead 1 guy all the way.
Now, is Evil Dead technically a 1981 movie? That's the debate.
Internet Movie Database is 81. It's not, though. It was widely released in, 82, 83?
83,
I have to do Internet Movie Database because I'm watching 200 movies, and I know that this one was not widely released.
Right.
It's just the easiest way to follow it. Even though they've already changed on me from 81, 82. Now I'm not rewatching One Dark Night and Piranha 2 because now they switched from 81 to 82, which they originally, because there's mistakes on there. But
yeah, I just didn't get reviewed till 83, so I tend to think of it more as 83, even though they screened it as one-offs in 81. So yeah, I don't know.
Martin's the fucked up one. If you're trying to do the time frame for Martin, the Romero movie, because it was 76 is the earliest. That's barnyard screening. It's you can't count 76. You got to count 77, right?
Right.
But that probably wasn't even released till 78, really wide.
Martin also better than Halloween 2.
Yeah, Martin not on there. Martin better than every movie we named so far.
Right.
Yeah. So that's I'm a Romero guy, so anything Romero. Well, then we're gonna do Possession.
Possession's better.
Hands down.
Yeah. That's another one. Possession's a funny one because I got a bootleg tape of something in the 90s. I don't even remember what it was. And when the movie was over, it was the final 20 minutes of Possession. So it was somebody had taped over Possession. So for the longest time, I had no idea what movie that was. So basically, I watched whatever movie I originally had, and then there was the last 20 minutes of Possession. I'm like, what the hell is this? And yeah, it wasn't until a few years later when I got a bootleg of the long version of Possession that I finally was when the movie started going through. I'm like, wait a second. I'm like, is this the one? And sure enough, turned out to be. But yeah, I love Possession. Really,
That's a great movie.
Yeah. Well, there's so much. It's I mean, the difference between Andrzej Zulawski being kind of like an art house director, is he thinks about things in different terms than other filmmakers. I mean, the idea of setting it in Berlin, a divided city, to kind of like illustrate the idea of, the marriage being pulled apart and the child stuck in the middle.
All those movies that are shot in like West Germany or whatever on that, anything with the Berlin Wall in the background is automatically suffocating. And it shows like, There's another one from that year, that No Mercy, No Future, which is a lot like Possession, which is not really a horror, but it's psychological horror. It's a really twisted movie.
I don't think I've seen that one. I don't know if I know that one.
It's really kind of about a mentally ill woman, just like her going around. There's a really terrible. I don't want to get into it, but it's a good movie. It's I wouldn't call it horror, but it's like that Kismapa movie where there's like the tone people consider it horror from '81. The one it's in a Filipino movie where the abuse is based on the true story with the abusive father. There's a lot of those that are considered horror on Letterboxd, and you're like, is this horror?
Right.
Horror enough, I guess, to watch, but yeah. So we'll do. American Werewolf in London?
American Werewolf.
Easy.
Hands down.
Also, for the record, American Werewolf in London is better than The Howling.
Also agreed.
I like The Howling, but I hate right. I'm not trying to badmouth The Howling.
There's Howling people and American Werewolf in London people. Thankfully, we are all American Werewolf in London people.
Scanners.
There's a lot of interesting stuff in Scanners, but I don't necessarily think it's like a perfect film. There's also some issues with it. God, that head explosion is possibly the greatest thing in cinema. I mean, there's a lot more ideas in Scanners. I mean, there's a lot more ideas in pretty much every Cronenberg than Halloween 2. I may go Scanners.
I think I would go with Scanners as well, just because of Michael Ironside. I think
he's great in it. Yeah,
I think he's what tips it over. I think.
Right.
This one should be easy. I hope. The Beyond.
The Beyond.
Is that everyone's favorite movie?
I was going to say,
like, well, you know what I mean?
If anybody says Halloween 2 over The Beyond, they are suspect.
I'd be like, get out.
Right. Get the fuck out of my house.
Of course, The Howling.
Weirdly, I loved The Howling growing up. It has not aged that great for me, and I actually feel kind of the same about a lot of Joe Dante movies, where I don't love them nearly as much as I used to, with the exception of Gremlins 2, which might just get better every single time I watch it, because that movie is a solid 10. That is the funniest goddamn movie. But yeah, The Howling has kind of slipped a bit for me in the last 20 years. I still maybe better than Halloween 2, because I love werewolf movies. I love, like you're saying at the beginning, I love monster movies.
Character actor heaven.
It is. I might go The Howling, but that's tough. They're probably.
I admire The Howling a lot, but it had massive pacing problems.
Yes, it does.
Like that middle section, like literally nothing happens for a good 45 minutes at all. An issue.
Dead and Buried.
Oh, Dead and Buried. Yeah.
Dead and Buried, hands down.
It's fine. I actually have Dead and Buried pulled to watch. A friend of mine, a buddy of mine, comes over every Wednesday and we do movie nights. And he's never seen Dead and Buried. So I actually have that pulled to make him watch. And I cannot wait to see his reaction to the end. That's another movie that I always loved it, but honestly, it gets better every time I watch it. Dead and Buried is just fantastic.
That's the most underrated movie in 1981 right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a 10 for me. Like, I can't think of a single thing I would change.
I gave it a 10 last time I watched it. On the 4K, I was rewatching it for 81, and I was like, man, this is so good. House by the Cemetery.
House by Cemetery.
By the Cemetery. But the Beyond is better than that. If we're going that way.
Yeah, I love Froisy. I did watch the episode you did with Art and Troy on that last week, and there's some good observations in there. Although, just to chime in, my thoughts on the ending, I think Freudstein kills Bob, and that's why he ends in the afterlife. So Freudstein does get him.
I do think he's stuck in there. He's dead regardless. Yeah. He's stuck in that loop. I don't think he's ever getting out. I just don't know if he had to suffer the horrible death.
I think he did.
Or just at all.
Right.
Maybe it's his dad.
I was gonna say his. I think Bob's little arms are now Freudstein's new flesh. He's
He's a tear coming out of his eye, right?
Right.
What else do we got here? There's a couple that I'll mention. There's so many. Cannibal Ferox.
Which one you going?
One Halloween 2 on that one.
Okay.
It's
right. This one might even be a little skeezy for me. But I kind of appreciate that about it. It's not a great movie. But I do like it. It's funny and then it's gross. It kind of like does those two things. And I'm not the kind of person to bitch or complain about the animal violence in these movies, because it's there and you just deal with it, whatever, and then I'll be chomping down a hamburger later tonight. So, but it's still very unpleasant. And then it's just kind of like the rest of the stuff is just, it's amusing because it's not great. And it's so weird to me because Umberto Lenzi is a good director. So it's strange to me that his horror films are like his worst directed movies. His Polizioteschi stuff and his Gialli and Polizioteschi stuff are all fucking great, but yeah, it seems like his horror movies are kind of where he suffers the most,
with the exception of Nightmare City. I love Nightmare City. That's again that I like better than Cannibal Ferox by a lot.
Yeah, well, it's more energetic. Everybody kind of running around. Yeah. My favorite scene in Nightmare City is when the zombies, if you want to call them zombies, bust into the hospital. Right, yeah. Where they bust into they bust into the hospital room during when the surgeon's like in mid-operation. And he just takes his scalpel. He takes his scalpel and just throws it at the zombie. I'm like, that is the best 2 seconds of
that
cinema.
Doctor should not have died in that movie by movie logic. He should have been
so
the star
good.
of it after
I know. It was like he's been waiting for that moment his whole life. So good.
Like, he just throws this. That's such a dumbass movie. I love that movie.
It's so good. Right.
Burial Ground.
I go Burial Ground. I love that movie, obviously, since we'll be discussing it sometime in the future. There's a lot to love about Burial Ground. And that's another one that's, to me, kind of, unfortunately, it seems like the wrong sort of film fan has latched onto that movie for the wrong reasons. Everybody, oh, this cloth smells of death. He, so funny. I'm like, no, it's really a mean, crazy, nightmarish, nihilistic movie. But we'll talk about that later, obviously.
Yeah, I definitely Burial Ground all the way. Could I just also add that as well, I have VHS installed for Cannibal Ferox. I think that Nightmare City and Ghost House are both far superior movies.
Which ones?
Ghost House and Nightmare City I vastly prefer over Cannibal Ferox.
I'd go for sure on Nightmare City. I don't know about Ghost House. I don't
love it every second.
Galaxy of Terror.
Halloween 2.
Yeah, Halloween 2.
Galaxy of Terror has good parts, but as a whole, it's kind of a mess.
The ending's I love that movie, but the ending's doo-doo.
I will 100% go Forbidden World over top of Galaxy of Terror.
Not me.
Really? Oh, it's so trashy and so ridiculous.
They're both trashy and ridiculous.
True.
I Die with the Crystals is not in Forbidden. Ghost Story.
Definitely this. Ghost Story is, to me, Ghost Story is like a 5. Yeah,
I like Ghost Story, but it really craps all over the book and it has a lot of problems. But there are things that I like.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, I like Ghost Story. I never read the book though, and it was a few time watch for me to like it. The first time I was like, that was way too slow, and I was like 12, 13, and then as I got older, I just grew to appreciate Ghost Story a little bit more. But I didn't expect much out of it this time around because I had such a poor memory of it. When I watched it, I was like, oh, it's good. I liked it. Evil Speak, which I love.
Evil Speak's a fun one, especially now that it is available uncut everywhere, which was hard to do for a while. Like, I originally had to get a French Canadian VHS of it because it had all the gore scenes that were missing from the US VHS. And funny enough, that VHS tape was actually used for the old Anchor Bay DVD to plug in one shot that they couldn't find anywhere else of pigs ripping the guts out of the girl in the shower. There was one shot that was from my old French Canadian VHS that thankfully they found film elements for with the Blu-rays. I'd go Halloween 2. I think Evil Speaks kind of a mess. Great climax, but again, big pacing problems with it. Clint Howard is kind of annoying in it for the hero. So yeah, Needle Dick as they as they keep calling him. Was his name like Needlemeyer or something? What was it in that?
Needlemeyer. It was Needlemeyer.
They keep calling him like Needle Dick or something. So yeah, it's fun. It's Evil Speaks good. I would say Evil Speaks like a 7. So it's not that far removed. But yeah.
Evil Speak for me is kind of in the same category, like Fear No Evil, where it's like I like it, where it's ambition. I don't think it entirely succeeds, but I really enjoy it.
Right,
so,
right.
But yeah,
See,
Halloween for me.
I
also,
love. Go ahead.
The Evil Speak also wins for like one of my favorite goofy open mat versions. You ever watch the open mask version? It's hysterically funny. Like all the
you see like Mike's. I know you see more butt in it when the girl's in the bathtub. I know that was why they wanted the open mat version, because there's more nudity in it, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of like really goofy shit you can see like at the top and the bottom through the whole thing. It's really funny. It's a totally different viewing experience.
Right.
I'm a big fan of Evil Speak. That's one I probably saw really young. I think I had a VHS tape, so I'm gonna have to go Evil Speak. For Fear No Evil, that movie, the climax is great and everything else is terrible. And that's because they fucking took that movie away from him, I think.
Well, Fear No Evil has possibly my favorite scene of school bullying I've ever seen in my entire life, where like in order to bully the kid, they have him naked in the shower and they're kissing him. I'm just like, what?
That's not a thing.
This?
That never happened. That's sexual assault. That's not bullying. Right. Again, 80s things. Like, and also that bully is going through some shit more than the actual kid getting bullied.
I'll teach you. Mwah, mwah. It's like
there's so many more. I could any that you guys want to bring up. I mean, there's some wacky stuff like Mystics and Bally and Queen of Black Magic that are really good movies.
How do you compare those to anything else, though?
Yeah, I was going to say, right. Yeah, Indonesian cinema is not comparable to anything else. Yeah, I mean, I didn't do my homework, so I can't remember. I probably named most of the 81 stuff that I could think of.
Strange Behavior. That's a great
which I really like.
Night of the Werewolf, the Nashi one's a great one. So, I mean, there's still others. Yeah, just stuff that people would forget about that is really good.
Right.
I appreciate you guys doing this. Had a lot of talks about 1981. So is there anything you guys want to plug?
No, not me. I don't do anything.
Well, Cinema Arcana is wonderful.
Yeah, I wish I've been slacking on. Funny enough, since we started recording this podcast, Nathaniel has also recorded 3 more commentaries.
Yep.
Strange how that works.
Troy, how are you doing over there? Okay.
Yeah, you can find me on social media at Cinema Arcana. Occasionally I do stuff. I don't even know what I have coming out soon. I guess Run and Kill commentary with Art Edinger, who's also co-hosted a couple of these episodes. So yeah, you can find Nathaniel where?
At Mondo Digital, mondo-digital.com. You can hear the commentary that Bruce and I recorded, got repurposed on, I think, the greatest box set of last year, the Central World of Black Emmanuel.
Yes.
Our track will never die, apparently. That's the 3rd time it's been out, I think.
Yes.
But yeah, you can find me on the social media at Mondo Digital, and written 5 books. My latest one, The Fright Fest Guide to Vampire Movies, is out from all of your favorite retailers. So check it out.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having us.
I'll be out of here in a second. Okay.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Make him the cutest that I've ever seen. Give him 2 lips like roses and clover. Then tell him that his lonesome nights are over. Sandman, I'm so alone. Don't have nobody to call my own. turn on your magic beam. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Bum 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 Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Make him the cutest that I've ever seen. Give him the word that I'm not a rover. Then tell him that his lonesome nights are over. Sandman, I'm so alone. Don't have nobody to call my own. Please turn on your magic beam. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Bum 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 bum. Mr. Sandman.